Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt, back inside the Beltway. Good Wednesday morning to you, live inside the Beltway. Yesterday was one of those great cross-country days. And I mean great cross-country days. You say, how is that possible? Well, I got to the airport early, fetching Mrs. Hewitt, since she'd come out at a different time, was on a different flight back. And so we were in separate airports, using separate airplanes to get to the same place at the same time. So that meant one major change in my travel, is that I was alone in the airport for 2 hours before the flight, because I'm a 2-hour guy, and I'm alone on the airplane, and I have basically a stretch of 8 hours to just read, absorb, and think. Talk to no one. That's the great advantage of masks on planes. Everyone's sort of shut up. And none of your neighbors talks to you, right, in the age of virus. One of the very few silver linings in its nightmare is that nobody tries to talk to you on airplanes anymore. And I finished David Drucker's In Trump's Shadow. I listened to nearly the complete end of The Fugitivities by Jesse McCarthy. Listened to an hour of Buckeye Talk. And Buckeye Talk is hosted by Doug Lesmaries, who you hear on the show on Friday in the college football playoff show segment, and Nathan Baird and Stephen Means. And then you mix all that up, jumble it all up with today's rundown, and you realize nobody knows much at all, but you eventually have to get a lesson first. All right, a lesson first. What is a lesson first? That's the first thing you learn when you're a Catholic kid in the first day of first grade in 1965, whatever year I was. I guess it would be 62, that I go to first grade. That's the Baltimore Catechism, Lesson 1. There are 9, 10, I can't remember how many different things are in the Lesson 1, but that's what things like, why are we on earth? To know, love, and serve God. So everybody ends up with a few Lesson 1s and a few areas of expertise, and if they start talking shop outside of it, Drucker's book is so deeply, magnificently detailed about the Republican field for president. I know a lot of these people pretty well. I mean, Senator Cotton, Secretary Pompeo, I've known these guys for more than a decade and have talked with them for a long time. I learned a great deal about both men. I've known Vice President Pence for, I would guess, 25 years. I learned a great deal about Vice President Pence. I report politics for a living. I do politics and government. The show is 90% current events, breaking news, politics, and 10% sports. Culture's in the politics, of course. Culture's upstream from politics. And then 10%, maybe 5%, Cleveland Browns, Indians, and Cavaliers. Ben had a good NBA fantasy draft last night because he got Colin Sexton, but I'll come back to that in a bit. And outside of your areas of expertise, you really need to study more and listen more, not talk more or assume more. But that is actually the opposite direction we are heading in as we become more siloed with tunnels and freeways between us. All right, there are some tunnels you don't know about. People are talking to each other, my Democratic tunnels. And there are some freeways where you move from Ohio State land to GOP land to China Hawk land. Here's lesson 1, lesson first. We are in a Cold War with China, and it is deadly serious, and we're not treating it that way. It's as though we did not engage in the Cold War with the Soviet Union from the very beginning. And in that Cold War, we're in a position of strength. So I'm going to replay in segment 3 today my interview in the first. I'm going to replay in the first hour today the interview I did in the last hour yesterday with Senator Tom Cotton, because of the lead story in the Washington Post, in my view. Right? It should be the lead story in the Washington Post. It is the lead story in the world, and it is the lead story every day in the world. China's test of hypersonic vehicle is part of a program to rapidly expand strategic and nuclear systems. And this made the front page of the Post. It's at 5:45 p.m. Ellen Nakashima. And everything Ellen tells you is correct, but she's just slow. But I'm glad that the media is waking up to what in the last year of the Trump administration, a series of 5 speeches that began with Vice President Pence and included FBI Director Wray and then Attorney General Barr, and then National Security Advisor Robert C. O'Brien, and then finally Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, when he was still Secretary of State at the Nixon Library. They laid it all out. So the smart people have known for a while this is a deadly, serious competition between civilizations. And there are going to be 2 winners. China seeks the Finlandization of the world. Russia insisted on the Finlandization of Finland when it was the Soviet Union and Finland was Finland. They had to be basically at the beck and call of Russia. Free, sort of, kind of. And that's what the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, wants for the world. And the world is waking up to that. So the rundown today, I'm going to do right now, but understand that lesson one is that we are in a new Cold War with China. And we have to begin to teach people this and emphasize this and talk about the specifics. Because the only way we won the last Cold War, the first Cold War, remember there was a first World War I, then a second World War? Now we had a first Cold War, now we're in the second Cold War. And I think historians will note this probably when General Secretary Xi ascended to his permanent general secretaryship of the Chinese Communist Party. I think that's when it will date to. Because he had a plan. That guy had a plan. That guy is brilliant, by the way. He is really smart. That makes him very dangerous. And we have to start acting like that. And broadcasts have to be informed by that. And the news really should pivot off of that. And what David Drucker discovered is that the essential, whether or not President Trump runs, whoever will be the nominee, they must be a combative, constitutionalist conservative and committed to confronting the left in all of its forms. A committed, constitutional, combative conservative. And probably the most important thing is combative constitutional. Drucker has got this down, and the people who are the serious leaders in the GOP have this down as well. And it all begins with just saying, first and foremost, we are in the second Cold War with the Chinese Communist Party, and we're not getting out of it soon. Everything else is secondary to that. And we have a very inept national security team right now. There are a couple of rising stars that you might be able to hope for. In the Congress, the Democratic Party is absolutely weak and out of touch with everything. There are a couple of people left, like Angus King. Mike Gallagher and I will talk about this later today. There are a few people you can rely on, but basically Democratic Party doesn't get it. Even if they weren't hopelessly out of touch with the 74 million people that voted for Trump and a lot of the 80 million people that voted for Biden, even if they weren't hopelessly cut off from common sense, even if they were not in the thrall of the squad and the incoherent, it's not really a dogma. There's an incoherent tick-tock quality to their politics, so it makes it really impossible to describe. It doesn't matter. Lesson one, we are in the second Cold War with China, deadly serious. And that's what fugitivity's added to this conversation. Buckeye Talk just made it very obvious to me. There's so many silos about which we don't know anything. If you listen to Buckeye Talk yesterday, it's just Stephen, and it's Stephen Means isn't there. It's Doug Maries and Nathan Barrett. And they spent an hour and 41 minutes talking about the Ohio State Buckeyes 6 games this year. An hour and 41 minutes, and I was riveted. Riveted. They're very smart, very funny, very self-deprecating, self-aware professionals doing their job. And the idea that I know anything about Ohio State other than I hope they win is just stupid. It's like them trying to tell Dwayne how to produce a radio show. They would have no more idea how to do what Dwayne is doing right now. That's not a podcast. They're very good at podcasts. But you understand how closely related those things are? Journalists doing podcasts, journalists doing a news show. Dwayne and I in the latter category, because this is a news show. And the degree and depth of knowledge in both of those silos is profoundly, it goes way deep. But you can't have both. There just isn't enough hours in the day. Now, here's the rundown. Just to make sense of these headlines, what do you have to know? Bennett meets UAE, Bahrain envoys, is invited to Abu Dhabi for state visit. America's political and business elites no longer agree on China. Democrats scaling back budget bill, press for compromise by week's end. Biden tells Democrats that package up to $1.9 trillion should be new target of talks. Republicans set to block voting bill again, raising stakes on filibuster. Nebraska congressman indicted on campaign finance. Question, Squid Game boosts Netflix third quarter subscriber growth. Facebook is planning to rebrand the company with a new name. Ron DeSantis has won the COVID wars comparatively to other governors in the blue states. GE Union Pacific mandate COVID-19 vaccine. The booster jab rollout in Great Britain is falling behind, and there's a fifth wave. In tackling China's real estate bubble, Xi Jinping faces resistance to property tax plan. All right, that's the rundown. How does anyone cope with this? I'll tell you on the next segment. Then do listen. to Senator Cotton's interview from yesterday. You've got to hear it. Stay tuned.
Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
CNN is going crazy. Joe Rogan called them out the other day. Now they're sitting there trying to lie and say, no, we never called ivermectin a horse dewormer. So we'll play a couple audio clips for you because they sure as heck did. And quite frankly, in my opinion, they're complicit in the deaths. And I don't say this lightly. I don't say it just because I want to say something that's shocking on air. I sincerely believe it. I believe Facebook. I believe a lot of these big tech companies, I believe CNN, MSNBC, a lot of these people are complicit in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Americans. I really do, for not getting the word out on therapeutics.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
Over 200 million Americans have gotten at least one shot. We've been patient, but our patience is wearing thin, and your refusal has cost all of us. So please do the right thing.
Now you're being patient again. We shouldn't be divided on the vaccine mandate. Now you're back to that because guess what? Your obstinance isn't working. Your mandates aren't working. Are there going to be booster mandates? Have you noticed nobody's talked about a booster mandate? Does a mandate only apply to round one? What about round two or three? It is the left who has politicized COVID, not us.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Schools are lining up to push the transgender agenda on kids and cut parents out of the equation.
How a million children were placed with local foster families. Parents from all walks of life share their stories of overcoming the one-child policy by taking in orphans.
Go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
This White House has absolutely no idea what is happening in America. It is completely divorced from reality, devoid of any understanding. And you know, they always say that the organization reflects the leader. Well, they've got a feckless, pathetic, completely out to lunch leader, and that has completely permeated this White House, if you can call it that.
So at this point, it's hard to imagine how much worse the situation could get. In that case, the question I always return to, and you are a guy who's worked on so many campaigns, not just in the White House, your political sense is fine-tuned. Is there not a point, if you look at the cargo ships off LA, you look at the 2 million illegal aliens, you look at the 4 million people who resigned from their jobs last year, you look at the inflation, you look at everything to do with national security, with Afghanistan. Is there no point at which Biden becomes an albatross around the neck of the Democrats, or are they just too afraid to have the cackler in the Oval?
It's happened already. Look at Virginia.
Yeah.
Terry McAuliffe is losing to Youngkin in a race where Biden won by 10 points.
But hang on, Boris.
Okay?
Boris, it's not just that, Youngkin has a shot. Did you ever think that Terry McAuliffe would actually publicly state that the Democrat president is the reason that he might lose Virginia?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com. Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
But yet our country is controlled by
New day, America. Hugh Hewitt, inside the Beltway. Get up, get going, get moving. There's so much happening in the world. What a great time to be alive, and I hope it stays that way for Americans. It is not such a great time to be alive in Burma, where thousands and thousands of people are fleeing over the border into India. It's not a great time to be alive in Afghanistan, where they held a party to honor the suicide bombers of the last 20 years. The Taliban did. Big dudes posting their W's who's not going to have that on the Biden website. It's not a good day to be in China. It's not a good day to be a lot of the places in the world, but it's a great day to be an American. And that's the key thing. I want to make sure that the country stays strong. Mike Pompeo was on Fox with Sean Hannity last night, cut 24.
What we did for 4 years, Sean, was make clear to the people of Taiwan that we'd be there to support them, to provide what they needed so they could defend themselves. And we made clear to the Chinese Communist Party that it was completely unacceptable if they took military action against the island of Taiwan. Those two basic facts were things President Trump was very clear he was prepared to defend. They could see that we did that elsewhere in the world, when we struck Qasem Soleimani, when we fired rockets into Syria, when they used chemical weapons crossing President Trump's red line. I think they all knew that we were serious about protecting Americans. I think they realized that the debacle in Afghanistan, the fact the Iranians fired missiles from the Gaza Strip into Israel, have all shown American weakness. And I see that the four things you walked through tonight, those are all things where America is showing weakness. And when you do that, our adversaries will do everything they can to put us at risk and to crush us.
Now, it's not just China, by the way. Russia is allied with the People's Republic of China, as is Iran. It's the new axis of formidable evil, and they are against us. Parts of less so. Probably the weakest link in that chain is Russia. But Iran and the CCP are they're hooked up together. We got to understand the world that way. We have to act that. That's why the news that Israel is going to have a state visit by Prime Minister Bennett to meet with the Crown Prince, I believe, with the Crown Prince of the United Arab Emirates, MBZ, is such fantastic news. It's huge. The world's figuring itself out, sorting itself out. And it's also sorting itself into those who are clued into what's going on, the moment in history that we are, versus those who have no idea at all. That would include the Democratic Party, where the socialists are in complete retreat. The squad may not have sounded surrender. What's the retreat bugle? Have we got a retreat bugle somewhere? They're retreating. They're down to $2 trillion and falling. Remember, they began this year wanting to spend $8 trillion. They're down to the max they're going to get is 4. So their plans have been cut in half. Still going to be ruinous inflation. That brings me to the market report this morning. Birch Gold sponsors this. If you're buying gold and you're not buying it from HughGold.com, you're making a mistake. Text my name, Hugh, to 474747. And if you want to diversify, the market had a good day yesterday. This is the Dow up 198 points, the NASDAQ up 107. Netflix earnings were surprisingly strong. The thing is, don't, as Brian Wesbury said, and he'll be on today, he said with me in Atlanta a week ago when we were on, but after Herschel Walker was on, don't sell your stocks for 10 months to a year, because this money's got to go somewhere. It's going to inflate the stock market. But do buy your house now. Don't get out of the market. Don't. This is not my advice. I'm not a financial advisor. Find people like KeyCityCapital.com and Brian Wesbury to give you advice. But be prepared. This isn't going to last, and it's because the inflation will have to be stopped, and they're going to throw fuel onto that fire, and we are going to end up with just a rotten recession. Boy, the hangover from this. China is going to face a bigger hangover. When I come back afterwards, I will explain it. But that's going to be destabilizing. And that's why you need to listen to Tom Cotton. I went back and read after Dwayne posted the transcript yesterday. I read it, and I said, my gosh, and we sent it everywhere. A few news outlets picked it up that Cotton was being so blunt, so direct about China. And then the Washington Post wakes up to it above the fold. You better clue in. Most important thing, we are in the second Cold War. And it started, and it's ongoing, and it's for keeps. Now, if you want to put some gold aside for that period of time, you go to Hugh Gold or text my name, Hugh, to 474747. You can roll over some of your IRA or 401k, no more than 5 to 10%. Get diversified, but get smart. Listen to this next replay from tomorrow, and I'll be back to talk about it on the other side as well, of the last hour interview with Senator Cotton. If you didn't hear it yesterday, clarity, clarity, clarity. Stay tuned.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Birch Gold Group.
Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
But yet our country is controlled by Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, and BioNTech. And therefore, we're not even allowed to have a conversation about ivermectin. But the few people that are free speech warriors like Joe Rogan, he does not let up. Cut 55, and then we'll go through all three cuts here. And this is, by the way, if you have not listened to this podcast discussion with Sanjay Gupta, it's incredible. Because maybe Sanjay Gupta thought that they were going to have a nice little conversation about why people need to wear masks. I don't know what he was thinking going on Joe Rogan's show. But Joe is mad, and good for Joe. Joe Rogan asked Sanjay Gupta, does it bother you that CNN lied about me? Cut 55.
Does it bother you that the news network you work for out and out lied, just outright lied about me taking horse dewormer?
They shouldn't have said that.
Why did they do that?
I don't know.
You didn't ask? You didn't think that was you're the medical guy over there.
I didn't ask. I should have asked before coming on your podcast.
But they did it with such glee.
No,
yes,
Joe.
they did. I watched.
Gorgeous. I want to frame that. Because because we see this little shriveling of a weak human, Sanjay Gupta. I should have asked. I didn't know. You understand that these media reporters have never been called out before? I think Sanjay Gupta was there to promote a book. I don't think it's doing very well after that. I think he has a new book, like COVID War Zero or something. I really think it's called World War COVID. I think that's the name of the book. And so CNN, he's the medical guy there. And so Joe says, you're the medical guy there. What do you mean? And Joe Rogan doesn't give up. He's a dog with a bone, everybody. He says, wait a second. It should bother you. It's a lie on your network, and it's your conscience of it.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
The public would be outraged if they knew the truth.
Why do you think our politicians are not on the sidewalk right now talking to you?
Don't have no respect.
The old wall randomly turns into a guardrail, followed by miles of open border.
Human trafficking gone.
That journey is extremely dangerous.
The 7-year-old girl died in the desert.
From the country of India.
A great pillar of the community was killed by a man who had been deported at least twice.
This little urn contains the ashes of my son. His dreams cut short forever.
We're so worried about other countries' problems, and we don't even focus on our own.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
Religion. It's not just about saying I have a right in this country to not have the government not allow me to go to church, but also that the government cannot compel me to participate in any sort of event, including a vaccine, by the way, that goes against my sincerely held religious beliefs. And so it should just be a matter of course that if you have a conscious objection, then you can say, I, as a Christian, as a Muslim, as a Jew, as any sort of religion, I mean, this covers all religions, by the way, all faiths, all sincerely held beliefs, you should be able to say, I decline to be coerced into participation. But what we're seeing is that a lot of employers are not only requiring a lot of information for people to say, well, you have to justify your religious exemption. We're also seeing that they want this so-called, what they're calling an interactive process. That's basically an interrogation. I have clients right now that they have filed for a religious exemption on the basis of we're pro-life, that's what the Bible teaches, and I cannot take this vaccine. And the Human Resources Department, from the legal counsel of these employers, want to sit down and basically interrogate them and say, is this really a sincerely held religious belief? And they're using this as a pretext to try to deny religious exemptions. It's absurd, and I hope that when there are more lawsuits filed, like just today, in Texas, United Airlines was forbidden from enforcing their vaccine mandate against employees who are claiming a religious exemption. So we're already seeing that the courts are protecting this, but hopefully it'll be more than just Texas.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com. Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
They lied
What did
and
they
said
say?
I was taking horse dewormer. First of all, it was prescribed to me by a doctor.
Yeah.
Along
They
with
shouldn't have said
a
it was
bunch
horse.
of other
If it was-
medications.
if you got a human pill, because there were people that were taking it, the veterinary medication, and you're not, obviously.
It's called neuromectin, not ivermectin. So not only is CNN lying about it, they don't even have the decency to look up the correct drug for you. This is why we cannot trust the mainstream media. They just lie.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
Welcome back, America. If you, like the rest of us, read Dimitri Sevastopoulos' article in the Financial Times on Saturday on the launch by China of a hypersonic missile that orbited the globe, taken into space by a Long March missile, you'll be very interested in what Senator Tom Cotton, who joins us now, has to say about that. Good morning, Senator Cotton.
Good morning, Hugh. Good to be on with you.
It's great to talk with you. Now, I know you're a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, so Dimitri's article in the Financial Times may not have shocked you like it shocked me, but what to make of that news?
Well, Hugh, it's a reminder the Chinese Communist Party wants to replace the United States as the world's dominant economic and military superpower so they can call the shots, so they can dictate to the United States what our policies will be around the world and who we can and cannot support, and they can hold all of the United States at risk with the threats of nuclear annihilation.
How significant is a hypersonic in space?
Pretty significant, Hugh. Again, it's not shocking that the Chinese have been working on these hypersonic missiles. That's been known for a while, as is the United States. We're still more advanced than China is, but China, as they are in so many other cases, and their military buildup is closing the gap. The main difference, for probably the purpose of your audience, between a hypersonic glide missile and a ballistic missile, is that hypersonic glide missiles are designed to evade ballistic missile defenses. Ballistic missiles follow a normal trajectory. You know, it's just like if you watch a crime procedural drama and they talk about the ballistics of a bullet. Same thing with a rifle. Of a rifle, same thing with a missile. It goes up, it comes down in a predictable pattern. That's what allows missile defense to work. Hypersonic glide vehicles are able to move at a much faster rate of speed and to take evasive or unpredictable maneuvers. So it's not surprising that China is pursuing these because they want to be able to strike and hold at risk all of the continental United States.
Now, the only response to hypersonics is either mad, mutual assured destruction by having our own that can do at least as much as theirs can, or an undetectable, indestructible nuclear deterrent, such as the Columbia class might present, or directed energy weapons, which I understand are at least 5 years away. Does this announcement or this scoop make it more likely that the Democrats will pause in their rush to spend at least $1.5 trillion and put some of that in the national defense, Tom Cotton?
Well, Hugh, I wish that were the case, but frankly, the Democrats have been the party of military weakness for decades now, going back to the Vietnam War and then Jimmy Carter and on through Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, and Joe Biden. Like clockwork, when Democrats take power, they cut the military and they waste money on welfare programs and on their clients and their patrons. So you would think that China conducting such a rapid military buildup would have been a wake-up call to the Democratic Party for a long time. It's just not the case, though, Hugh. They don't understand that strength is what matters in foreign policy, because only the strong can survive in a dangerous world. And for that matter, only the strong can protect the weak, and only the strong can afford to be merciful.
Now, am I not correct that any single Democrat or Angus King, independent from Maine, who caucuses with him, and I like Governor King, Senator King a lot, or Jack Reed, who is allegedly a hawkish kind of, could not any single Democrat insist that part of this massive fire hose of additional spending they're poised to pour out on the United States include Columbia-class funding or hypersonic or directed energy weapon funding?
Yes, Hugh, in principle, you are correct because the Democrats only have a 50-50 Senate, control the agenda only by virtue of Vice President Harris's tie-breaking vote. But for any Democrats, even those you mentioned who are serious at times about our national security, to hold up the Democrats' massive welfare bill and Green New Deal to demand more military spending would be about as popular in the Democratic Party as holy water is to vampires.
But, at some point, well, maybe not at some point. Let me play you Jen Psaki yesterday for our audience who has not yet heard. I played it a couple of times. She gets a question on the hypersonics. Cut number 17, Jen Psaki at the White House yesterday.
Can you comment on reports that China tested a nuclear-capable hypersonic missile over the summer to the surprise of U.S. officials? Are these accurate, and do these raise concerns about China's nuclear capabilities?
Well, I know Secretary Austin, I should say, was asked this question this morning and addressed it, but I'm not going to comment on the specific report. I can say and would echo what he said, which is generally speaking, we've made clear our concern about the military capabilities that the PRC continues to pursue. And we have been consistent in our approach with China. We welcome stiff competition, but do not want that competition to veer into conflict, and that is certainly what we convey privately as well.
Now, Senator Cotton, we welcome stiff competition has never exactly been the Democratic line on arms control and nuclear weaponry. But if we're going to have stiff competition, it's going to take some money. So what is it? Are we giving up or are we going to compete?
Hugh, first off, I'd like to address this common rhetorical turn of Joe Biden's administration. The president himself has said on numerous occasions that we welcome the competition or we're not afraid of vigorous competition. Hugh, this is not like some Olympic matchup of figure skaters or basketball teams where you go out and you compete in a game and then you all shake hands and hug on the medal stand afterwards. This is a struggle for mastery of the world, in which life or death are the stakes. So for these Democrats to keep saying we welcome the competition is the height of folly. We don't welcome the competition. We'll see who the best team is, and maybe we'll play a best-of-7 series the way they're doing in Major League Baseball right now. We want to beat China. China is waging a Cold War against us. Part of that Cold War is the military buildup, not just these hypersonic glide missiles, but the new missile silos they're building in western China, fortifying their air force and naval capabilities just across Taiwan on the Taiwan Strait. These are all of a piece with their efforts to replace the United States as the world's dominant superpower. And it's time to get rid of this idea that it's just a friendly competition in a game and face the facts that we have to win this Cold War. Otherwise, we will lose it by default.
Some Democrats are in love with the rise and fall of great powers theory, that there must be a handing of the baton off every 100 years or so between Great Britain and the United States, or now between the United States and the CCP. That is actually dire, because they are not committed to what we're committed to. They're not even in the same playing field, Senator Cotton. Am I wrong in that? I don't think I'm being hyperbolic.
Well, Hugh, a lot of these Democrats in Congress are Maoists, so maybe they are fine with the rise of the Chinese communist power. But, to borrow from your Friday Hillsdale with Hugh conversations, many Democrats are deeply influenced by German historicism and this idea that history has a capital H and it's determined by mechanistic forces, and therefore there must be a changing of the guard, so to speak, of great powers. That is not the way the world works. It is influenced and directed by human choices here and in China and elsewhere in the world, and that decline is a choice. And if America declines and China replaces it, it won't be because there were some kind of mechanistic, deterministic forces dictating that. It'll be because leaders in the United States made the wrong choices over a number of years.
Now, Senator Cotton, you've got the three key committees: Judiciary, Armed Services, and Intel. This is being presented as a surprise that China's launched by a Long March missile of a hypersonic into space, and it did a global orbit and hit within a couple dozen miles of its target. Is it a surprise to our DARPA intellectuals, do you believe? We know that hypersonics, the United States has about 7 different kinds under development, but I don't know that we've actually tested any in space.
Hugh, I wouldn't say that it's a shocking surprise. We invest a lot of money in determining the military capabilities of our adversaries. Consistently in the Cold War with Soviet Russia, that was the intelligence that was best. was assessing military capabilities. We're much weaker at assessing the intentions of foreign leaders, in part because they keep those intentions very closely held. Nor is it, I wouldn't say what some people call this a Sputnik moment. The thing that was shocking about the Sputnik moment is it demonstrated a capability that the United States did not then have. That's not the case, as you point out, with hypersonic glide vehicles. We are also rapidly trying to build up that capability, and we're still doing a better job of it than any country in the world. But it is, again, a reminder that China is not simply building defensive weapons to protect itself, to peacefully integrate into the world. They want to dominate the world order and replace the United States as the world superpower. We cannot allow that to happen.
There was an article by Ross Douthat in the Sunday New York Times, Senator Cotton, that James Bond's newest movie, the fifth in the Daniel Craig turn at 007, or not 007, depending on how one reads the movie, left one with the impression that China didn't exist. There is no mention of China, not in any of the 5 Bond movies made by Daniel Craig, except with Shanghai as a backdrop and another fleeting backdrop shot. As opposed to the original Bond franchise was built on Russian being a menace, the Soviets being a menace. Do you think that's purposeful on Hollywood's part, just like the NBA silence on Hollywood is purposeful?
No question, Hugh. Hollywood is filled with shameful communist bootlickers who are desperate to have access to Chinese movie theaters, and therefore you never see movies with Chinese bad guys, unlike, as you said, during the Cold War with Soviet Russia. And it's not just Hollywood. You think about it. Except for Fox, since they spun off their movie studio, every major news channel in America is owned by or affiliated with a movie studio. ABC and Disney, NBC and Universal, CBS and Paramount, CNN and Warner. Do you think they report the news straight on China? Or do you think the word has come down from on high that you can't be too tough on China, otherwise we can't get our new animated movies into Chinese movie theaters?
I actually had never thought of that before, Senator. You're making me... So every major news organization in America has an interest in China accepting their product from their theaters.
Every major TV news channel, the 3 major networks, ABC, CBS, NBC, MSNBC, which is their NBC's affiliate, and CNN, are all owned by or affiliated with a major movie studio. The only news channel for which that's not the case is Fox, since they spun off 21st century or 20th century Fox years ago. So do you seriously think the corporate executives, those companies, allow their news channels to report the news straight on the Chinese Communist Party when they're trying to get their latest James Bond movie into Chinese theaters, or trying to get their latest Disney animated movie in Chinese theaters? Give me a break.
Have you ever held a hearing? That's fascinating. I don't know that the American... I don't even know if that's in the public interest for a news channel to have a movie relationship, something that is revenue dependent upon. I don't know that that's in the public interest. I don't know what you can do about it, but has there ever been a hearing on it?
No, we haven't had hearings about it. I mean, I've taken great efforts. I put out a big report earlier this year on what I call the China lobby, which is the vast influence peddling that China has across our country, not just in Hollywood and the media, but also in big business, all of whom want access to the Chinese market, many of whom source their products in China. University presidents and college presidents across the country that depend in no small part for revenue from full-rate Chinese-paying exchange students. The China lobby is vast and pervasive in this country, and it's something we have to understand and that we have to confront and defeat, because it exerts a baleful influence on our foreign policy directed towards the Chinese Communist Party.
It's also a lobby now trying to downplay what the hypersonic breakthrough means for them. Senator Tom Cotton, always a pleasure. Thank you, Senator. Great to catch up with you on this most important of issues. We will transcribe and post that interview with Senator Cotton. I want to remind everyone, take your relief factor with you before you go out today, especially if you're going to go out and vote early for Glenn Youngkin today. If you're going to go stand in line for a while, and the lines are long in Youngkin country, which is pretty much everywhere that isn't a suburb of D.C., and even in D.C., you see a lot of Youngkin signs. ReliefFactor.com will power you through standing in line or walking in line or walking to the polling booth. Early voting available in every county in Virginia. Make sure you get there early and take your Relief Factor before you head off if you're going to hike to there or run to there or bicycle to there. Just anything, even getting in and out. So I urge you, go to ReliefFactor.com, ReliefFactor.com. ReliefFactor.com. $19.95 gets you a 3-week starter pack. Get out there and get it. Stay tuned to The Hugh Hewitt Show.
Salem Now.
We'll see one young lady identify as transgender, and the next thing you know, 6 or 7 young ladies in that same school are now identifying as transgender.
Children taught at age 5 they can create their gender identity, and it's being celebrated.
Schools are lining up to push the transgender agenda on kids and cut parents out of the equation.
Every cell of their body that has a nucleus is male or female.
We've now seen parents losing custody of their children if they don't go along with this.
We've all been created XY or XX, so that means there's only 2 genders. And so really the battle is against the creator.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
But can you share with us an overview of how Mark Zuckerberg and his wife directed literally hundreds of millions, I think $419 million into communities, into areas that Biden really needed, and how that plays out?
Mark Zuckerberg and his wife, Priscilla Chan, donated out of their own personal resources, not through they have a private foundation that they normally would do something like this through, but they went through they use their own private resources, and they funneled those resources into a little sleepy Chicago-based nonprofit called Center for Technology and Civic Life. This had nothing to do with conventional campaign finance, like a donation to the DNC to blanket the airwaves with a pro-Democrat Party message. This was money that was funneled through this little 501c3, which is supposed to be nonpartisan organization, directly into the election process. It's as if the DNC was somehow able to insinuate itself into local election offices and kind of take over the running of the on-the-ground realities of the election from within these local election offices, that even though a lot of the people that work there have their own partisan leanings and whatnot, the vast majority of them are serious professionals who try and do the best job that they can. But the activists who came along with CTCL money were not so objectively inclined.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at Rumble. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
On the Salem Radio Network.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt, Rick Astley. Now you may be wondering, why am I playing this? Because it was in Ted Lasso, and it's now back. So I went up and looked up Rick Astley during the break. He has a 2-CD greatest hits album out. He's 55 years old. I mean, we've all been listening to Rick Astley and not knowing it's Rick Astley, unless you're Brit. Well, Adam knows. Dwayne has his music everywhere. Dwayne would play Rick Astley every day if he could. Welcome back. I'm never going to give you up to the China lobby. The reason I replayed the Cotton interview from yesterday is because we have a strange... When 3 articles hit on the same day, you realize all of a sudden consensus has emerged. In the New York Times, Tom Friedman today has a long column on China's bullying is becoming a danger to the world itself. In the Financial Times today, Janan Ganesh, America's political and business elites no longer agree on China. And I've already told you about the Washington Post story by Ellen Nakashima national security correspondent, on China is in the midst of a rapid expansion of its strategic and nuclear weapons system, and its progress has alarmed U.S. national security officials. All on the same day. So I notice these things because if you have a discipline of reading, I start every day, every single news prep cycle, whether it's before I go to bed or after I get up early. I either do it late at night or early in the morning. Last thing I do, first thing I do. Start with the Times of Israel, go to the Financial Times, the Telegraph, then the Wall Street Journal, then the New York Times, then the Washington Post, then to my Twitter feed to see if I've missed anything. And imagine you woke up this morning and I told you that the People's Republic of China had fired 300 hypersonic missiles and struck every visible American Navy ship, sunk them, and every submarine in port while their attack submarine did the same thing. Would that automatically mean nuclear war, or would China simply have preempted the battle? Would they have done that? Have you ever thought about that? Because that is, in fact, Admiral Stavridis and his co-author, Elliot Ackerman, wrote 2034, and it was supposed to be like The Hunt for Red October and help me out, Dwayne. What was Clancy's second novel about World
Red
War
Storm
III?
Rising.
Red Storm Rising. That's the best one. That's
yeah,
the
that
greatest one.
that was a good look at what World War III would look like.
Yeah, well, we need Cold War II. We need to really get our arms around Cold War II. Now, at home, we need the Constitution to keep us strong. That brings me to Alliance Defending Freedom. This Cold War I would not have been run without free speech and the ability of the Committee for the Common Defense to come together, the ability of Reagan to speak and get elected. It wouldn't have happened but for the persecuted church in East Germany being supported by the evangelical church in America, protected by the First Amendment. So we need combative constitutional conservatives who are national security realists. Got that? Combative constitutional conservatives who are national security realists. And they have to begin to explain, like Senator Cotton was just explaining. We used to do this, and it's not going to make sense to my young colleagues. Everybody was required to know something about the Soviet Union. Everyone was, the Time magazine would do these charts when I started reading Time when I was 8 or 9 years old, and then really starting to read it when I'm 12 or 13. And every couple of months they'd do they'd have little inserts on the United States military and the Soviet military, missiles, bombers, tanks, people under arms. It always was scary as hell for little kids because they had so much of a larger army, as does the Chinese Communist Party does right now. It was always our DARPA. It's always been our weapon strength. This hypersonic thing changes that. And I now see that the left, the liberals, let me just put it this way. Liberals now see it. Tom Friedman is a liberal. He is not a leftist. Tom Friedman is to the left what I am to the right. He's about that far away from the center as I am on that, because he's not a constitutional conservative. He is not a national security realist. But he actually does want the United States to endure and flourish, and for individual liberty to flourish. He's rather naive about the world. I think he's been proven wrong repeatedly, and I think that the Nixonian realist is the place to put your money bets. But at home, we have to be able to conduct and educate our kids without indoctrination. We have to be able to pray and gather as church without suffocation. And that requires your support for Alliance Defending Freedom. Head over to HughHewitt.com and wait for that banner to load. They sponsor this show. They have for years, on and off. They come in and they go. But they're sponsoring a fund drive because this is the year that we're going to win Roe and get that taken away from diverting the national consensus. It's going to be a state-by-state decision on reproductive rights and abortion access. And this is going to be the year that Virginia goes back to being red because their school system we have to fix our schools, we have to fix our defenses, and we can't screw around anymore. And it even seems like the liberals understand. The left doesn't have a clue. More on that in an hour or two. They are hopeless. But Alliance Defending Freedom needs your support. Go there, then come back for hour number 2 of this morning's Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Alliance Defending Freedom.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
to get your reaction to Peppermint Patty, who was at the podium, who was explaining why, high gas prices, Boris, it's not a problem everywhere, really. Cut 5.
For a range of issues, and we should talk about those, that the American people are, of course, impacted by rising prices of gas in some parts of the country, not all.
Well, Boris, it's okay then, because it's only some parts of the country. Which parts of the country, Boris?
Oh, yeah. So there's that 50. Remember, Obama thought there was like 62 states. So it's probably those 12 states or whatever it was. Those are the parts of the country they're referring to.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
The most powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized.
We are now all rooting for his success.
That's not what happened. It was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
Joe Rogan is a good man. Joe Rogan's a fun person. I don't agree with him on everything. I have to say this every time because I get these emails from people. Charlie, how dare you? Like, what are you, Greta Thunberg? Look, Joe Rogan has a different worldview on certain things, but he loves freedom and he loves his country. He's willing to speak out about it. He has been phenomenal on the lockdowns, on the vaccine, on masks. I had a chance to meet Joe Rogan about a month ago in Los Angeles. And Joe Rogan, right when I met him, we posted it on Instagram, and the picture we said has ivermectin boys, and it went totally viral because you're not allowed to say that. And so Joe Rogan, of course, took ivermectin after getting the Fauci virus and made a rapid turnaround.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
Why don't we talk about Southwest Airlines, which has been in the news very recently.
Basically, Southwest had to cancel over 1,000 flights, and they claimed initially that it was for the weather. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them were actually out of Florida. And ironically, I was actually out speaking at a conference in Miami, and it was beautiful weather when I flew out on Sunday. So this was, of course, not weather related. They're trying to claim that it wasn't for pushing back against the vaccine mandates. But what a lot of people are speculating, and what I think there is some merit to, is that there is a group now of pilots who are saying we are refusing to be coerced by our employer to take the vaccine. And in fact, the Union of Southwest Pilots has filed a lawsuit in the Federal District of Texas. What's interesting, Eric, is that traditionally conservatives have been kind of anti-union for a lot of really good reasons.
Oh, yeah.
And to say that, we are coerced into having to give union dues, and then they, of course, funnel those dues to Democrat candidates or things like that. But this shows the power of collective bargaining. This group of pilots is now pushing back and saying we will not be coerced by our employer into unilaterally modifying our employment conditions to take a vaccine that could, by the way, have a lot of negative influence. I mean, there was a friend of mine who was even saying the other day that a friend of his, who is a pilot for a different carrier, has some anecdotal evidence to say that there have been some pilots who have had blood clots or, the myocarditis, other things at altitude. And so there are a lot of pilots that are very concerned about that.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
Was a genius. His most amazing discoveries thought to be written in a lost journal. Now, in the right hands, it could revolutionize the 21st century, but in the wrong hands, kill him. Jump.
If you can stop an earthquake, doesn't that mean you could start one too?
That's why that notebook should never fall into the wrong hands.
There's an old brown battered notebook in my office at work. You have to find it, take it, and keep it hidden at all costs. The G20 leaders meeting downtown, they're in danger. In fact, the whole of downtown could be in danger.
If we are to build the superhuman, we must first eliminate those who are flawed.
People are created equally. All of downtown, the high-rises were built on rollers to withstand horizontal shakes. A vertical quake this size could collapse half of downtown.
We have commenced the countdown.
Shall we stop this thing?
Save the universe!
Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
The mayor is backtracking. So it's happening. People have to stand up. These people understand that they have to get reelected. And sometimes we just have to remind them who's in charge. And we, the people, are in charge. That is our system. It is a democratic republic. We all get to participate, but we elect people that we trust. We put them in office, and we trust them to keep us safe. We trust them to abide by the Constitution and to keep us free. And when they do not do that, we have to kick their butts out of office. But the important thing is, as voters, you have to always be mindful of freedom. You have to always be mindful of freedom. Quite frankly, I do believe that it's one of the advantages that I have as a black conservative. You can call me Uncle Tom sellout, whatever. There's no affirmative action plan in heaven. All I have to do is worry about Jesus. I don't have time to worry about you. But I do believe as black conservatives, I compare us to runaway slaves, because I often say our thoughts are consumed with freedom. That's what happens oftentimes with black conservatives, is we find out and we get this piece of information, we get this piece of history, and we're like, what? The federal government or the Democrat Party did what to enslave us? What did they do? And then you just start looking for that. I also believe it's an advantage that people of faith have, whether you're Christian, whether you're Jewish.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
The most powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but
this
that
is a
they've been
story of
weaponized.
how 1 million children were placed with local foster families through an unlikely alliance between the Chinese government and a British footballer. Parents from all walks of life share their stories of overcoming the one-child policy by taking in orphans. With unprecedented access across the country, this is a unique insight into the lives of the 90s orphans now driving the 21st century's fastest growing economy.
This story needs to be told across the world. At a time where there's so much negativity and cynicism, here's proof that a single leap of faith can change the world.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
The most powerful organs of the state.
Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway, and I am happy. I am not happy about waking up 2 hours earlier than I had to because I set a West Coast alarm for the East Coast. This is what happens when you go from Atlanta to California, from California to D.C., and you do so with a Herschel Walker event, a Brian Wesbury event, in Atlanta, a gala dinner honoring Secretary of State Pompeo, National Security Advisor O'Brien, a sit-down with Brett Baer at the Nixon Foundation, and then fly off reading 2 other books in the way. Everything gets jumbled up. And then with stunning clarity. Yesterday, I always read the Financial Times. That's where you see that the China hypersonic missile story broke on Saturday. Dimitri broke it, and I'm going to get him on the show soon. Then this morning I wake up and I see that you've got Tom Friedman in the New York Times, and you have my colleague at the Washington Post, Alan Nakashima, very, very, very serious national security reporter. And then I don't know Ganesh, the fellow Ganesh, very well, but he writes for the Financial Times often. He's always very smart. I think he's left. I think he was Tony Blair Labor left. But it doesn't matter where they are. Ellen not having any politics, Tom Friedman being a liberal, and I think Ganesh being left. They're now in. They put their cards on the table. They realize. Now, they're going to be wrong about a lot, like they were wrong about Reagan got the first Cold War right. Nixon got the first Cold War right. We understood. Eisenhower got the first Cold War right. LBJ and JFK got the first Cold War right. Jimmy Carter got it wrong. George H.W. Bush ended it, and we won. Now, like the First World War, it didn't end. We didn't realize that the card Nixon played to end the first Cold War, that was the card that put in motion the ending of it. By detaching China from Russia and by leaving the Soviet Union out there to wither in an uncompetitive arms race with which they could not keep up. That brought 89 to, let's say, 19. 30 years of, we're okay, end of history nonsense. And we all bought in. And when General Secretary Xi took over, he began to change China. And China, the People's Republic of China, is now the old Soviet Union in terms of geopolitical adversarial posture towards the United States. And this article, the Ganesh article in the Financial Times, America's political and business elites no longer agree on China. This is what Cott and I were talking about yesterday when he was instructing me on, I know about movies and the NBA being in the thrall of the Chinese Communist Party. I know that. They're compromised. Not in the sense of being on the take, though they are above the board on the take. The NBA is addicted to PRC money. But the business community is going to come reluctantly into this. The business news has become a portal to the recent past, the Ganesh piece begins. Researchers at BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, tell investors to as much as triple their exposure to China. Goldman Sachs is cleared to take full control of its securities business. Their Apple, at least for now, withholds a Quran app from Chinese users after officials in China express qualms. 3 is a column, goes the rule. But it is not a duty to stop there. The American Chamber of Commerce in Shanghai reports more confidence among its members than any time since the trade tiff began. As for Goldman's coup, J.P. Morgan Chase had already piped it to the landmark of full ownership in China. No one in Washington in, say, 2018 would have bet on much of the above. In their book, Superpower Showdown, the reporters Bob Davis and Ling-Ling Wei chart the raw meetings between U.S. business and Chinese leaders in the early years of Donald Trump's administration. Our president is not an aberration, and C-suite stars, but the voice of the fairly aggrieved country. Some worked with him to press Beijing for concessions. Business, once China's friend in Washington, its feathers smoother with hostile White Houses, had cooled. For what has happened since, 2 theories do the rounds. One is that China answered the grumbles about market access and much else. That's not true. That's just simply not true. The other is that the mask is off. In Wall Street and beyond, commercial imperatives are reasserting themselves. And this means, even the Democrats are kind of onto this, though they are not spending a dime on national defense in this $4 trillion they've spent this year in extra money. They printed $4 trillion. And right now, any Democrat, Senator King, if you're listening, or any Democrat, Senator King, you can walk in to Chuck Schumer's office and say, we're going to triple the capacity at Bath Iron Works. And we're going to do it in this bill. And by the way, every Democratic senator has the same ability to get long-term important defense programs underway or expanded in their states. Now, I do not expect Dianne Feinstein to do much of throwing down at all, because no one would take seriously anything from her staff. They don't really believe she's having much of an active role anymore. And our Alex Padilla doesn't even know where the bathrooms are yet. So California's going to get wiped out again. But if you go up to Washington State, and they're not, is it Lockheed or is it Boeing that's building the F-21? I don't know. Jerry Hendrick will have to send me. Wherever it's being built, that state should be demanding, let's build the fleet of them right now. The Columbia class, 12 new boomers, should be appropriated right now. Right now. It's a Sputnik moment. And I am encouraged that these three national outlets have come together, and from sources not named Hugh Hewitt. Now, the key part, the next step, is to electrify the United States that we cannot afford the education system we have. We just cannot afford it. We can't have elementary and secondary schools overrun with ideologues teaching CRT, not teaching sentence structure, grammar, science, math. Can't have. We have to encourage our young scientists. We have to encourage our young math wizards. We have to stay in the game, and we got to get very serious about weeding out bad teachers. And CRT will make for bad teachers. Glenn Youngkin, yesterday, cut number 9.
We have some abhorrent chapters in our history. We have to teach them. But friends, Dr. Martin Luther King called us all to be better than we are. He called us to judge one another based on the content of our character and not the color of our skin. And critical race theory is a political agenda that is absolutely in our schools. And it teaches everyone to view everything through a lens of race and then pits our children against one another. So friends, on day one, we will teach history, but I will ban critical race theory.
All right, Glenn Youngkin's going to win this thing. If he doesn't, we're in trouble, because this is clearly an education election in Virginia. Are you going to throw in with the teachers' unions and their incoherence and their ideology? Are you going to give the Glenn Youngkin team a chance to fix the Commonwealth schools on performance and curriculum? I don't want ideology taught in school. I want history, science, math. I want STEM courses. I want advanced everything. And we got to throw money at teachers. We've been coasting on the seed corn. I don't know any other way to put it. Since 1989, we have just been coasting on the seed corn, and we've been so self-indulgent, and the politics reflect this. They reflect a certain unseriousness about the world. But in David Drucker's book, In Trump's Shadow, that is changing. It's changing rapidly. Now, we do not have a president who's clued into this. Our vice president is clueless about it. But hopefully someone will emerge within the Democratic caucus led by Angus King. Maybe Jack Reed will step up. I'm going to ask Mike Gallagher, who are the serious, Seth Moulton is a serious Democrat. Who are the serious Democrats who will say, okay, this $2 trillion we're going to spend that because we're Democrats and we spend other people's money. But we're going to take 25% of that and we're going to rebuild our ports and our shipyard capacity and our submarine tenders, and we are going to get the hypersonic missile production into full gear, and we're going back to SDI, and we are going to be a national security unified team. That's in front of the Democratic Party right now. Now, it's all falling apart. The squad is in a rout. Joe Biden, that's the big story that will obsess cable news today, and they won't understand a lick of it because Joe Manchin said 6 months ago, $1.5 trillion is my number for additional spending after Joe Biden's $2 trillion, and he stuck to his guns, and the left just keeps caving. Okay. And now they're down to $1.9 trillion. That's the upper range of President Biden's demand. President Biden, I think, just wants $4 trillion in 1 year. I think that's what, in his mind, such as it is when it goes to his legacy, he's thinking, I spend $4 trillion, everyone knows that Corn Pop got his. I spend $4 trillion and FDR and I are together. I know I'm pounding the table. Sorry, Dwayne. He's going to yell at me during the break. I am excited, but at the same time a little bit alarmed. Come right back. Mike Gallagher coming up later in the hour. You are listening to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show brought to you by Sierra Pacific Mortgage. For more info, call 888-888-1172.
Show.
Go ahead and tell me that you voted for Joe Biden and you can't believe what's happened to America. Jimmy Carter is going to be a resounding success compared to this guy. Listen to Circleback Psaki attempting lamely to explain away Ron Klain supporting the charge that all of this crisis in America with the empty shelves and surging inflation and the supply chain crisis is a high-class problem, and it's actually a good sign. You know, people, it's a good thing.
Why would Ron Klain tweet that, and would you agree that that's a little bit tone deaf?
Do you think 2 tweets means more? I'm just curious. So just for context, what Ron Klain retweeted was a tweet from the former chairman of economic advisors, Jason Furman, where he said, for full context, which I think is important, most of the economic problems we're facing, inflation, supply chains, are high-class problems. What he went on to say is, we wouldn't have had them if unemployment rate was still 10%. We would instead have had a much worse problem. So I think the point here is, well, there are some critics who are saying, what some of these critics are saying we don't know if they're saying that what they thought was great was when the unemployment rate was double what it is today, or when people were locked in their homes and therefore gas prices were lower. We're at this point because the unemployment rate has come down and been cut in half, because people are buying more goods, because people are traveling, and because demand is up, and because the economy is turning back on.
Give 'em the old razzle-dazzle, razzle-dazzle 'em. That's Jen Psaki.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at Rumble.
Streaming on Salem
Trending now on America First with Sebastian.
Are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized to go after perceived domestic enemies. And that's very scary.
Our constitutional democracy enshrines the peaceful transfer of power.
We are now all rooting for his success. The peaceful transition of power is one of the hallmarks of our democracy.
We don't live in the United States of America as is any of us would like to understand it.
We have a peaceful transition of power process. That's not what happened.
They interviewed General Flynn, and they did it in what was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
This is what third world security states do. They spy on their political opponents like this.
This is part of a concerted Russian influence operation.
Russian interference.
They colluded. They were in on it.
He would constantly say, I have seen evidence of collusion.
Until this is released, I can't comment. I can't go into the particulars.
Russians, I'm not going to be specific. But he knew he could just say it on TV and then hide behind, well, it's all classified, I can't get into it.
Well, it's classified. You can't see it. Collusion. You just got to be willing to see it.
New York's Daily News ran this front page, Trump is Hitler.
How could 62 million Americans vote for Hitler? Are 62 million Americans Nazis?
We really almost thought it was a joke, like really you're not going to accept that you lost this election.
Then they see the Russia collusion narrative sitting right there in front of them and say, why don't we just say that he cheated?
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence. It's given people who are bad faith actors a license to do whatever they want because they literally feel like they're fighting Russian spies and Nazis.
Russiagate has been the most egregious abuse of everything that was supposed to have been good about our government.
The thing that they were investigating the Trump campaign for is what they themselves were doing.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. I'm inside the Beltway. I'm glad I'm not in New York, because that's going to be a mess. De Blasio, the failed mayor of New York City, who is still, at this very day, a month after Andrew Cuomo quit in disgrace, still less popular than Andrew Cuomo, has just announced that New York City workers are either going to get vaccinated or they're going to get fired. It's his Patco moment. I just tweeted out the link from the New York Times. Get vaccinated. No more testing option. Get vaccinated. Now, whether or not he can do that, there's an exception for, I think, prison guards. Probably because of a collective bargaining agreement that forbids the imposition of any kind of vaccine mandate, which, by the way, de Blasio ought to blow off if he really believes what he's doing. If he really believes what he's doing, then you've got to blow that off and tell them you don't get an exemption, prison guards. You get vaccinated, you go home. It's his Patco moment. Now, I was in law school when Patco happened, but by the time I was the director of the OPM, it's general counsel, actually. I think I had to testify in front of House on the Patco firing as the office personnel manager, general counsel. That's right. Jerry Sikorsky was the chair. I was 29 years old. My mom called me to tell me to take my pen out of my ear. So, Dwayne, you're not alone. After the hearing, in those days, it was on C-SPAN, of course. She watched her son, and all I did was put my pen in my ear because I was listening to Sikorsky rant at me about the fired Patco air traffic controllers. And there wasn't anything to say. But, point being, Patco moment in New York, I can't see de Blasio actually doing it. I mean, the guy is made of jelly. He got 0.1. What a crazy time. I cannot wait to talk to Gallagher after the break. Let me check Markets Quick, brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. This story on the real estate market in China teetering on the edge of collapse, I've got to ask Brian Wesbury about it. I don't think that's going to have much impression on our markets. But yesterday, AndrewandTodd.com, they're doing box office business still because Americans have woken up to the fact that they got to jump in there and get a 10-year treasury, which zoomed up to 1.635% yesterday. So they got to, if you're going to buy a house in the next 5 years, do it now. Do it now. Sell the car, get the money out of the mattress. You're allowed to withdraw some things from protected accounts if you put it into a house, I think. Talk to your accountant. I'm not an accountant. KeyCityCapital.com if you want a good one. And you've got means. Help your kids become homeowners by becoming a co-borrowing, non-occupying owner. Just go to AndrewandTodd.com or call 888-888-1172. I don't think the real estate crash there is going to... Money is not easy to come by. We do not have funny money flooding real estate-backed mortgages. No. But yesterday, the Dow went up 198, the NASDAQ went up 107. And the country has realized stocks are going to go up, to Brian Wesbury said in Atlanta last week. They're going to go up. Don't get left behind either. Don't sell your stocks or do get into the real estate market. Do it with AndrewandTodd.com, 888-888-1172. And please remember Alliance Defending Freedom, great sponsor of the show. Matt Bowman and I have been friends for a dozen years. He's probably listening on his drive into work this morning. He was a great hero of the Trump years, a pro-life warrior inside the HHS. He's back with ADF now, and he's there to tell you that churches were protected by the ADF during the COVID shutdown by Alliance Defending Freedom. ADF was out there. Here's Matt Bowman.
And these are churches that are following mask and CDC guidelines, but are just saying it is important for us as a congregation to come together and worship together. We've been able to get over a dozen victories on behalf of churches, getting laws struck down, getting victories so that churches are able to meet together once again. We are literally keeping the door open for the gospel in those circumstances.
I would love if I could just see my audience one time. I know there are millions of people who are listening who are not hearing that and saying, that's not about me. Yes, it's about you. It's about your tithe. You've got to tithe your money, your time, and your talent. And not many people tithe, but maybe you can super tithe. Alliance Defending Freedom is the best investment in religious liberty you can make. I mean, the very best investment in religious liberty you can make, because they are pro bono for the churches that are imposed upon anywhere in the United States, and the synagogues and other congregations or people of no faith at all. First Amendment warriors, but they need your help. Can we have a few $1,000 donations today? A few $100 donations today? Some of you know you can afford this, and Alliance Defending Freedom is a great place to do it. Give them a call, 866-359-9644. 866-359-9644. Or go to HughHewitt.com and let ADF come up. Support Matt Bowman. Support all those good people over there. Come right back. Mike Gallagher joins me. The second Cold War. People are finally recognizing it. Stand tuned.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Alliance Defending Freedom.
Salem Now.
¿Cuánto queda?
No queda nada. Que lo siento mucho.
Have you ever thought of going to seminary?
Madre, padre, ¿quién está listo para ser transformado por el poder de su palabra?
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
CNN is going crazy. Joe Rogan called them out the other day. Now they're sitting there trying to lie and say, no, we never called ivermectin a horse dewormer. So we'll play a couple audio clips for you because they sure as heck did. And quite frankly, in my opinion, they're complicit in the deaths. And I don't say this lightly. I don't say it just because I want to say something that's shocking on air. I sincerely believe it. I believe Facebook. I believe a lot of these big tech companies. I believe CNN, MSNBC. A lot of these people are complicit in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Americans. I really do. For not getting the word out on therapeutics.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
Over 200 million Americans have gotten at least one shot. We've been patient, but our patience is wearing thin, and your refusal has cost all of us. So please do the right thing.
Now you're being patient again. We shouldn't be divided on the vaccine mandate. Now you're back to that because guess what? Your obstinance isn't working. Your mandates aren't working. Are there going to be booster mandates? Have you noticed nobody's talked about a booster mandate? Does a mandate only apply to round one? What about round 2 or 3? It is the left who has politicized COVID, not us.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Schools are lining up to push the transgender agenda on kids and cut parents out of the equation.
How a million children were placed with local foster families. Parents from all walks of life share their stories of overcoming the one-child policy by taking in orphans.
Go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
This White House has absolutely no idea what is happening in America. It is completely divorced from reality, devoid of any understanding. And you know, they always say that the organization reflects the leader. Well, they've got a feckless, pathetic, completely out to lunch leader, and that has completely permeated this White House, if you can call it that.
So at this point, it's hard to imagine how much worse the situation could get. In that case, the question I always return to, and you are a guy who's worked on so many campaigns, not just in the White House, your political sense is fine-tuned. Is there not a point, if you look at the cargo ships off LA, you look at the 2 million illegal aliens, you look at the 4 million people who resigned from their jobs last year, you look at the inflation, you look at everything to do with national security, with Afghanistan. Is there no point at which Biden becomes an albatross around the neck of the Democrats, or are they just too afraid to have the cackler in the Oval?
It's happened already. Look at Virginia.
Yeah.
Terry McAuliffe is losing to Youngkin in a race where Biden won by 10 points.
But hang on, Boris.
Okay?
Boris, it's not just that, Youngkin has a shot. Did you ever think that Terry McAuliffe would actually publicly state that the Democrat president is the reason that he might lose Virginia?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
This is a genius. This most amazing discoveries thought to be written in a lost journal. Now, in the right hands, it could revolutionize the 21st century.
You can stop an earthquake. Doesn't that mean you could start one too?
That's why that notebook should never fall into the wrong hands.
Shall we stop this thing?
Save the universe!
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, joined by Congressman Mike Gallagher of Wisconsin. Good morning, Congressman. How are you?
Good to be with you, Hugh. Sorry about those Browns. Last place in the AFC North. That's got to hurt. That has got to hurt.
Congressman
Meanwhile,
Gallagher,
Packers 5-1.
The number is 10. What does the number 10 signify?
I don't know where this is going.
That's the number of playoff losses by Brett Favre for the Packers. He also lost one as a Viking, but Brett Favre lost 10 playoff games. Baker Mayfield has only lost one, and already people are comparing him with two dislocated shoulders, popped back in and playing to the new Brett Favre. I'm not worried about the Browns at all, Congressman. We got Brett Favre's soul is living in Cleveland.
Brett Favre's soul will always reside in Green Bay, Wisconsin, despite a brief detour to the Vikings, which we've forgotten about.
That's what I'm saying. When he went to the Vikings, he loosed his spirit animal upon the world, and it ended up with Mayfield. I'm telling you, it's Brett Favre. So, Congressman, I'm very happy this morning for a very weird reason. Tom Friedman writes a column warning about China in the New York Times. A lead story in the Financial Times says America's political class is divided from its business class over China. And Ellen Nicholson, I say it wrong, in the Washington Post front page, we're in a Cold War with China, basically. Do you think the other side has woken up to the fact that we're in the second Cold War?
Well, I think the Chinese Communist Party is making it very hard to ignore that fact. And what's interesting, I wrote a Wall Street Journal op-ed arguing that we were in a new Cold War with China last year. And I pointed out in part that the pushback is always from the Chinese Communist Party. They say we have a Cold War mentality. And I think they get so exercised about this because they don't want us to realize that we are in and act as if we are in an existential competition. They'd rather us default back to the cooperative framework that allows them to advance their military program, that allows them to advance their Belt and Road agenda, that allows them to practice economic coercion and global united front work. Meanwhile, we pursue naively grand bargains with the Chinese on things like climate change or stability on the Korean Peninsula or non-proliferation, all of which they have been bad actors on. And so, yes, we are in a new Cold War. That does not mean it's identical to the old Cold War. As we've talked about, what makes this in many ways more complex than the old Cold War with the Soviet Union is that our economies are so thoroughly intertwined. And that's why one of the biggest steps we need to take is to selectively decouple our economy from China's. And this, I think, is where there's still a divide within the parties right now. I think the Democrats are unwilling to do some very important things because of their donors on Wall Street and because of their natural constituencies with university endowments and state worker pension funds. We need to be prohibiting university endowments and state and local pension funds from investing in China in general and China tech in particular. And we need those on Wall Street who are lecturing us about global ESG investing to recognize the hypocrisy and the fact that China stinks on the E, the S, and the G. And if the G stands for anything, it should stand for genocide. But Larry Fink and BlackRock and others on Wall Street have yet to grasp that basic fact.
I don't know that Silicon Valley gets it either, from everything that I've read. The Congressman, in the aftermath of the public knowledge of the hypersonic launch on a Long March missile, meaning that we are a step behind. Now, your friend and colleague, Senator Cotton, did not seem as alarmed as many other people I'm talking about. Maybe you also are less alarmed because maybe we're not as far behind and there isn't the missile gap that I think exists there. We're about to spend another $2 trillion minimum, maybe 1.9 at the low end. Can you get any of your Democratic colleagues to spend any of this on strategic defense, whether it's Columbia class, whether it's opening shipyards in Maine? Angus King, put up your hand. Whatever you guys did in the solarium, you ought to be able to get that all funded in this bill. Where is Angus King?
Well, one bright spot in the House Armed Services Committee, we did have a pretty strong bipartisan vote to raise the defense top line. Remember, the Biden administration submitted a defense budget that was completely inadequate, that would have cut the Navy, that made no strategic sense. And as I wrote about in the Washington Post a couple weeks ago, my concern is that now the new forthcoming Pentagon strategy, Secretary Austin's forthcoming national defense strategy, is going to be based on this concept of integrated deterrence, which is really a vacuous buzz phrase that's intended to act as a smokescreen for cutting hard defense, cutting conventional deterrent capabilities and strategic capabilities as well. That being said, on the committee, there are some Democrats like Elaine Luria and others who were willing to vote with us to raise the top line. That's a good thing. I would say when it comes to hypersonics, I guess I didn't hear what Senator Cotton said, but I'm very alarmed. I do think this is a Sputnik moment. The fact that they have had hypersonic weapons for the DF-21 and DF-26 for years, while we're still years away from initial operating capability when the Army gets its weapons, should alarm all of us. And for your listeners, Hugh, I know you know this, but what makes these weapons so dangerous is not just that they can fly fast, it's that they can maneuver while flying very fast, which completely undermines our early warning systems, our homeland defense. We're not just talking about their ability to threaten Taiwan, we're talking about their ability to threaten ports in America, major American cities. So we should be alarmed. This should be a wake-up call, but instead we seem asleep at the wheel, and the Biden administration is simply not attacking this with the urgency that we need.
I should say, Senator Cotton is alarmed. He is not surprised. That's how he presented it to me. Yep. But he's on the Intel Committee. So I want to ask you, Congressman, do you think, what percentage of people in Wisconsin think it's even possible that they might wake up some morning to learn that 100 hypersonic missiles had hit every carrier that was deployed, all the boomers that were above water and port facility, and that the Chinese were not expecting a war. They were just expecting a strategic strike at our defenses, non-nuclear. What percentage of Wisconsinites believe a Pearl Harbor of the 21st century is real?
You know, Hugh, I fear that it's a very low percentage, 5-10%. And honestly, I think particularly those in the financial community, particularly those in the business community who are making money in China, look at the risk of a confrontation over Taiwan, and they consider it a very distant tail risk. When I sort of say, hey, you got Admiral Davidson saying this thing's going to pop off in the next 6 years, the CNO agreed, as did the Commandant of the Marine Corps, they tend to dismiss that as just kind of the ravings of national security hawks. I think that's misguided. I think particularly after Xi Jinping pockets the massive propaganda victory of hosting the Olympics in Beijing in a few months, I think things could get very, very testy over Taiwan. And I think we need to do a better job of making the case to Wisconsinites as to why this matters. I was actually in the Capitol.
Do you believe, Congressman, I want to interrupt you for a second. Do you believe, however small the probability, that there is a potential for that kind of a surprise attack on America's strategic assets that the CCP would consider short of war? It's the Stavridis scenario. It's what 2034 is all about. The limited strike that just sort of cripples America's will. Maybe a carrier, maybe more carriers, maybe all carriers. Do you think Xi thinks that way?
I think the most likely strategy they're pursuing, as Bridge Colby, I think, lays out very well in his book that was just released, Strategy of Denial, is a fait accompli strategy. So essentially they move very rapidly.
Sun Tzu, right.
Exactly, to establish facts on the ground before we can do anything, or pursue very creative measures like over a period of a couple months, flying in, people on civilian airlines into Taiwan, kind of a quasi Little Green Man scenario. But in either scenario, I think they will be able to very rapidly move, overwhelm our early warning systems, and overwhelm Taiwan's indigenous defense systems, and that could get very risky.
I'm not talking Taiwan. I'm talking Pearl Harbor. And for my youth, we all grew up thinking that was possible. I don't remember the Cuban Missile Crisis, but that's second grade. people thought that was always a possibility, however remote, and that you had to prepare for that little probability. I think the difference between Cold War I and Cold War II, that Americans don't think about preemptive strikes anymore. They just don't even believe it's possible.
And I think, there's this quote from the Korean War where General MacArthur is talking to the Senate, and he says, it's wrong to believe that war can be applied in a piecemeal way, that you can make half war, not whole war. I think we tend to think that they'll engage in some sort of half war, but I'm not sure that quite is getting it right. I think you could expect in a confrontation with China that if deterrence really fails, they'll wage a whole war. Now, it may not be a nuclear war, but it will include shutting down exports of critical goods. It'll include attacking our critical infrastructure with cyber weapons. It'll include spreading disinformation on social media to destroy our will to fight, to say nothing about the conventional threats that you outlined to American carriers and ships and things like that. I think there is almost nothing that she wouldn't do to effectuate unification of Taiwan with the mainland. Even if, as Oriana Mastro and others have written, even if it results in him giving up half or more of the PLA's Navy, he's willing to pay a high price.
I believe that is correct. I believe that's correct. But I also think he has a goal beyond that, which is the Finlandization of the world. The way that he's Finlandized Hollywood, the way that he's Finlandized Silicon Valley. He's a genius, by the way. I'm not taking anything away from Chairman Xi. But do you, with the sort of the advent of a recognition that there's a second Cold War, does the American media understand, last question to you, understand Xi? I think this is the whole key. One guy can do this.
No, and I fear throughout the pandemic, the legacy media in America has been acting as useful idiots for the Chinese Communist Party. I mean, you have people, Chuck Todd and others, praising early on in the pandemic the way the Chinese handled their pandemic response.
Yeah, but Chuck is now a realist. I talked to Chuck. He's now a realist. I think all the big media is a realist. I don't know if our audiences, though, are aware of what that means.
Yeah, and I think people in public office need to do a better job, myself included, of connecting what can seem like abstract concerns about Taiwan or Xinjiang province, the Uyghur Autonomous Region in Xinjiang, to everyday life of Wisconsinites and even Ohioans going forward, and why this is something we all need to be worried about, and why you should be offended when a hostile foreign power is able to coerce major American industries, whether it's the NBA or Hollywood, right? I mean, that should offend every single American. We need to mobilize in a bipartisan fashion Americans to start taking charge of the situation and invest resources in our defense before it's too late.
Very quick last cheat question. Senator Cotton brought to my attention what I did not know, that every major news organization in the United States has a complicated relationship like Hollywood's with the Chinese Communist Party. All right, do you agree with that?
I do.
Wow. You see, I just think even hawks like me are aware of the wake-up call that came with the hypersonic, and I hope a lot of good luck to you. But go get some money from your friends, because the Democrats are going to spend $2 trillion, not a penny for defense, but trillions for Green New Deal. It doesn't make any sense. Congressman Mike Gallagher, remember the new Brett Favre is named Baker. It's Baker Favre. Talk to you next week. Representative Gallagher. Time for ReliefFactor.com. I did not take this in the first hour because I was replaying Senator Cotton's interview from yesterday on China. There it is. ReliefFactor.com, ReliefFactor.com. I want the record to show that I always deliver on time. Dwayne was telling me I was becoming lazy in my radio habits. No! Okay, Kirkman was Retro Omega. That is Stone Cold coffee. I am going to plug this in. This is my new Kasori that was sent to me by Beth. I'm going to plug it in and blow the studio up. I'm afraid we are overpowered on the studio. But when I do that, it will be because that is Stone Cold coffee, but I can still take my Relief Factor with it. And I get my Icarian, Kirkman, Resveratrol, and Omega. And I am not hurting today. Yesterday, airport days and long cross-country flights are when the old back begins to say, bark, bark, bark. Not today. ReliefFactor.com. It works. $19.95 to get started. 3-week starter pack. All you have to do is go to ReliefFactor.com and try it. 3 weeks. People came up to me. We talked Relief Factor with a couple of people in Atlanta. I urge you, go get started. Brian Wesbury's coming back. We're going to talk to him about this China real estate bubble. Don't go anywhere. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Key City Capital.
Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
But yet our country is controlled by Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, and BioNTech. And therefore, we're not even allowed to have a conversation about ivermectin. But the few people that are free speech warriors like Joe Rogan, he does not let up. Cut 55, and then we'll go through all three cuts here. And this is, by the way, if you have not listened to this podcast discussion with Sanjay Gupta, it's incredible. Because maybe Sanjay Gupta thought that they were going to have a nice little conversation about why people need to wear masks. I don't know what he was thinking going on Joe Rogan's show. But Joe is mad, and good for Joe. Joe Rogan asked Sanjay Gupta, does it bother you that CNN lied about me? Cut 55.
Does it bother you that the news network you work for out and out lied, just outright lied about me taking horse dewormer?
They shouldn't have said that.
Why did they do that?
I don't know.
You didn't ask? You didn't think that was you're the medical guy over there.
I didn't ask. I should have asked before coming on your podcast.
But they did it with such glee.
No,
yes,
Joe.
They did. I watched.
Gorgeous. I want to frame that. Because because we see this little shriveling of a weak human, Sanjay Gupta. I should have asked. I didn't know. You understand that these media reporters have never been called out before? I think Sanjay Gupta was there to promote a book. I don't think it's doing very well after that. I think he has a new book, like COVID War Zero or something. I really think it's called World War COVID. I think that's the name of the book. And so CNN, he's the medical guy there. And so Joe says, you're the medical guy there. What do you mean? And Joe Rogan doesn't give up. He's a dog with a bone, everybody. He says, wait a second. It should bother you. It's a lie on your network, and it's your conscience of it.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
The public would be outraged if they knew the truth.
Why do you think our politicians are not on the sidewalk right now talking to you?
Don't have no respect.
The old wall randomly turns into a guardrail, followed by miles of open border. Human trafficking.
That journey is extremely dangerous.
The 7-year-old girl died in the desert.
From the country of India.
A great pillar of the community was killed by a man who had been deported at least twice.
This little urn contains the ashes of my son. His dreams cut short forever.
We're so worried about other countries' problems, and we don't even focus on our own.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt, live inside the Beltway, joined by Brian Wesbury of First Trust Portfolio, the lead economist for First Trust Portfolio. Follow Brian on Twitter at Wesbury. Brian, it was a lot of fun working with you again in Atlanta last week. I really enjoyed it. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, Hugh, not only was it great to see you in person, it's been too long, but what a fun night that was. It was really great to hang out with Herschel Walker.
You've been back on the road for a while longer than the Salem hosts have been. I guess First Trust is back out doing its barnstorming?
We are. We've been out for probably 4 months now, I would guess. 3.5 months for sure.
All right, the big question.
40 cities so far.
I have alerted the audience to the bottom line. Don't sell your stocks for 10 to 12 months. Start looking at real estate. And you named one other investment. I can't remember. Don't buy bonds. That was Brian. That's the one slide Hugh Hewitt of Brian. I see in the Wall Street Journal this morning, in tackling China's real estate bubble, Xi Jinping faces resistance to property tax plan. They have a bubble, Brian. Even Xi admits it. When it bursts, will it hurt us?
Yeah, Hugh, I don't think so, and I mean, well, let me qualify that a little bit. From a macroeconomic point of view, I do not believe that it will damage the U.S. economy in any significant way. Now, if there are companies, there are individuals in the United States who do have investments in China, who have tied themselves more closely, and some of them may get hurt. But I just look at what happened in Japan, and I know Japan wasn't truly communist. China is, but Japan directed a lot of its investments from the top. Big
Cartelist, very cartelish.
Yeah. Yes, big business, big banks, big government, and they all decided back in the 60s, basically, that they were going to produce consumer goods and sell them to the world, especially to the United States. And it worked because they actually did it pretty well, and they were the first ones there. It's almost like who made the first cell phone, anyway, they won for a while until they couldn't execute it anymore, because eventually these big government, decisions get it wrong. And I would argue that's exactly what's happening in China. Yeah, let's build apartments. The government was letting people do things, but it was directing those activities. And eventually that top-down approach doesn't work. You need entrepreneurs to steer resources in a different direction. And I guess a perfect example would be here in the United States. Motorola was the one that made all those flip phones that everybody thought were the coolest phones out there. They led the phone market until they didn't. And if it's just one company, your economy goes along fine. If it's the entire economy, because the government has been directing everything, then you collapse. And so, anyway,
what is the exposure, though? If that happens, I really do think they're in for a huge, like a 2007 and 8 real estate dive in China that we had in the United States. I think they're in for that. What's the real world impact on our markets? Will if they get a fever, do we catch a cold?
Yeah, that's like that phrase came really probably from before anyway, before even Japan. But I remember it around Japan in the 80s all the time, and Japan collapsed in 1989. They peaked in 89, collapsed. The stock market was at 40,000, went below 10,000, and the United States boomed in the 1990s. And now what people will say is, well, we're more closely tied to China. And people produce there, we buy stuff there, but we've been moving our supply chain out of China for a long time. This will not be the same impact on the U.S. Our banks do not have exposure to Chinese real estate like they did to U.S. real estate. There might be a hedge fund that's got a lot of money in China.
Well, I think there's going to be. I think that there are some very, very wealthy people who are going to be very, very screwed by this. Will that impact us as they get margin calls?
I don't. The reason 2008 spread is because of what we call mark-to-market accounting, and I promise, I will not go into what that is.
You only have 30 seconds, so you better hurry.
But what all that did was it multiplied losses throughout the system, and we have now fixed that problem. So no, one of the things this is just a thought of mine. George Soros has been writing angry op-eds about China and President Xi and which direction he's going, which makes me think he's pretty invested there. I just wonder.
Interesting. Brian Wesbury, always a pleasure to talk to you. I'm going to keep coming back to this story because I just don't think America knows what's about to happen over either militarily or economically in the CCP and to its members and its Politburo. I'll continue talking about it. Stay tuned to the third hour of the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Key City Capital.
Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
It's not just about saying I have a right in this country to not have the government not allow me to go to church, but also that the government cannot compel me to participate in any sort of event, including a vaccine, by the way, that goes against my sincerely held religious beliefs. And so it should just be a matter of course that if you have a conscious objection, then you can say, I, as a Christian, as a Muslim, as a Jew, as any sort of religion. I mean, this covers all religions, by the way, all faiths, all sincerely held beliefs. You should be able to say, I decline to be coerced into participation. But what we're seeing is that a lot of employers are not only requiring a lot of information for people to say, well, you have to justify your religious exemption. We're also seeing that they want this so-called, what they're calling an interactive process. That's basically an interrogation. I have clients right now that they have filed for a religious exemption on the basis of we're pro-life, that's what the Bible teaches, and I cannot take this vaccine. And the Human Resources Department, from the legal counsel of these employers, want to sit down and basically interrogate them and say, is this really a sincerely held religious belief? And they're using this as a pretext to try to deny religious exemptions. It's absurd, and I hope that when there are more lawsuits filed, like just today, in Texas, United Airlines was forbidden from enforcing their vaccine mandate against employees who are claiming a religious exemption. So we're already seeing that the courts are protecting this, but hopefully it'll be more than just Texas.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com. Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
They lied and said I was taking horse dewormer. First of all, it was prescribed to me by a doctor.
Yeah.
Along
they
with
shouldn't have said
a
it was
bunch of other medications.
If you got a human pill, because there were people that were taking it, the veterinary medication, and you're not, obviously. You got it from a doctor, so that it shouldn't be called that. Ivermectin can be a very effective medication.
Did you see how uncomfortable he was? See, leftists aren't used to pushback, and that's exactly what Joe Rogan gave them, pushback. They're used to existing in these bubbles. They all think alike. They all talk alike. I'm not even sure that they all believe the same thing, but they're so cowardly that they just live to impress each other.
Dude.
Within these bubbles.
Dude.
Yeah, so let me tell you something. This guy, Sanjay Gupta, I've watched him a couple of times on CNN. I've watched some clips, and I tried to, just try to stomach through it, honestly. I don't have a lot of respect for Sanjay Gupta because I believe that he deceives a lot of people as well. I believe CNN does that. And first off, the drug ivermectin, we know that it's a human drug. He knows that it's a human drug.
Dude.
And Joe Rogan, my goodness, called him out on it.
Dude.
And it's a good thing. And by the way, let me correct the record. The medicine for animals is called neuromectin, not ivermectin. So not only is CNN lying about it, they don't even have the decency to look up the correct drug for you. This is why we cannot trust the mainstream media. They just lie.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
We'll see one young lady identify as transgender, and the next thing you know, 6 or 7 young ladies in that same school are now identifying as transgender.
Children taught at age 5 they can create their gender identity, and it's being celebrated.
Schools are lining up to push the transgender agenda on kids and cut parents out of the equation.
Every cell of their body that has a nucleus is male or female.
We've now seen parents losing custody of their children if they don't go along with this.
We've all been created XY or XX, so that means there's only 2 genders. And so really the battle is against the creator.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
But can you share share with us an overview of how Mark Zuckerberg and his wife directed literally hundreds of millions, I think $419 million into communities, into areas that Biden really needed, and how that plays out.
Mark Zuckerberg and his wife, Priscilla Chan, donated out of their own personal resources, not through they have a private foundation that they normally would do something like this through, but they went through they use their own private resources, and they funneled those resources into a little sleepy Chicago-based nonprofit called Center for Technology and Civic Life. This had nothing to do with conventional campaign finance, like a donation to the DNC to blanket the airwaves with a pro-Democrat Party message. This was money that was funneled through this little 501c3, which is supposed to be nonpartisan organization, directly into the election process. It's as if the DNC was somehow able to insinuate itself into local election offices and kind of take over the running of the on-the-ground realities of the election from within these local election offices, that even though a lot of the people that work there have their own partisan leanings and whatnot, the vast majority of them are serious professionals who try and do the best job that they can. But the activists who came along with CTCL money were not so objectively inclined.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at Rumble. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
Have to get your reaction to Peppermint Patty, who was at the podium, who was explaining why, high gas prices, Boris, it's not a problem everywhere, really. Cut 5.
For a range of issues, and we should talk about those, that the American people are, of course, impacted by rising prices of gas in some parts of the country, not all.
Well, Boris, it's okay then, because it's only some parts of the country. Which parts of the country, Boris?
Oh, yeah. So there's that 50. Remember, Obama thought there was like 62 states. So it's probably those 12 states or whatever it was. Those are the parts of the country they're referring to.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
Most powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized.
We are now all rooting for his success.
That's not what happened. It was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to
Trending now on the Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
Why don't we talk about Southwest Airlines, which has been in the news very recently.
Basically, Southwest had to cancel over 1,000 flights, and they claimed initially that it was for the weather. And a lot of them were actually out of Florida. And ironically, I was actually out speaking at a conference in Miami, and it was beautiful weather when I flew out on Sunday. So this was, of course, not weather related. They're trying to claim that it wasn't for pushing back against the vaccine mandates. But what a lot of people are
Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi. Canada, Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway, standing by for Senator Bill Hagerty from Tennessee. Gives me a chance, though, to remind you all I'll be in Ohio on Sunday night. FM 98.9, The Answer, will be hosting the debate of 6 senatorial would-be Republican nominees. I'll be moderating that debate. There are 6 very serious candidates in Ohio. Should be a lot of fun. They all want to join. The numbers, along with Bill Hagerty, my guest, Senator Hagerty from Tennessee. Good to talk to you, Senator. Good morning.
As always, Hugh, it's great to be with you. Thanks.
I'm interested, Senator. You're featured heavily in the book by David Drucker, In Trump's Shadow, your 2020 campaign, and Senator Cotton's great efforts to help you out in that campaign. And everyone will go read it. I'll talk to David tomorrow. But for these candidates that I'm going to talk to, these 6 Ohio Republicans, what's the best advice as a candidate who just went through basically Trump's GOP, the Trump era's GOP nominating process? What's the most important thing for them to focus on if they want to win the nomination?
I think they have to realize that this is an endurance test of an incredible proportion. They have to be ready to fight, and they have to be ready to win. They need to speak clearly to their voters, and they need to stay on the road every minute of every day.
Now, I believe the party has coalesced, as does David Drucker, around conservative, combative constitutionalism, standing up and fighting for what we believe in, and in the recognition that the Second Cold War is underway. Do you agree with both those propositions, Senator?
I do, and I say this, that one of the things that first inspired me about President Trump when he was still a candidate was his clear and very forceful vision on China. I've had experience in the region of Asia. I'd lived in Japan before, dealt with China. President Trump was the first back in 2015 to really call China out. And if you look at what's happened today, Hugh, you'd ask me America today, and America will, the average American will tell you that China is a massive concern for us, a security threat, an economic threat, a military threat. That was not well understood or appreciated when President Trump began to beat that drum.
Now, Senator, this morning in the Financial Times, there's a story. America's political and business elites no longer agree on China. There's also a story on Xi's property bubble, that he's got a real problem. And there's also a story on the front page of the Washington Post by Ellen Nakashima that the Cold War is out in the open now. They're building strategic assets all over the place. I asked Senator Cotton yesterday, I ask you, any chance of getting one Democrat to put some money for defense into this $2 trillion they're about to spend? Won't Angus King or Jack Reed do anything about our strategic capacity vis-a-vis China, especially after the hypersonic launch?
You know, I talked with Senator Inhofe just yesterday on this topic, and the hypersonic launch is a new era altogether. That creates a threat that surprised our intelligence community. It's a threat that we need to really ramp up our R&D and defense expenditure on. And I've got to believe that Democrats would be hard-pressed not to step up, particularly folks like Jack Reed, as you mentioned, Angus King possibly. But I've got to believe that there's going to be an appetite to do this now.
Well, you see, every single Democrat has the opportunity to go into the majority leader's office and say, Chuck, I need some of this trillions from my shipyards or from my hypersonic missile facilities, or for the F-21 for that matter, the B-21, or for the Columbia-class nukes. Has anyone done that yet? I mean, they're having a bargaining war between Bernie and Joe Manchin on what to spend. Where's Jack Reed? Where's Angus King?
Well, the war that they're having has been a private war. We hear little bits and pieces creep out. They're not talking to Republicans right now. They're talking amongst themselves. But I hope that this voice is making it to the table. What we're seeing is a party that's in complete disarray right now. But this is an area, particularly given the most recent news that you highlighted. This threat from China is stepping up. It's not going away. They've made it clear that by 2049 they want to dominate the world, and they're taking every step they can to do it right now.
Now, Senator Hagerty, you're on foreign affairs, and I made the assertion earlier to Congressman Gallagher. I think their ultimate goal is not just Taiwan, but the Finlandization of the world, going back to the era when the Soviet Union simply dominated Finland. Do you think the CCP wants to dominate the world in the way that the USSR dominated Finland?
Well, they've taken a different tack at it because they've used their economic might as a means to reach all across the planet already. I mean, we've seen it with their Belt and Road Initiative. They have taken huge positions in Africa, huge positions in Central and Latin America. I mean, this isn't just about their backyard. They've already moved out on a global basis economically. What we've also seen is corporations willing to move back there.
I was going to say, I think we've already seen the Finlandization of Hollywood and the NBA, and Senator Cotton yesterday raised the prospect that there might be the Finlandization of American media because of dependency on Chinese dollars. Do you see that?
We do see it and are very concerned about it. And even if you look at the financial institutions here, for example, that are being pressed harder and harder every day by the Biden administration to impose ESG requirements on their lending activities and things of that nature. Yet you also see these same institutions moving full speed ahead in China, not applying the same sorts of conditions on them, allowing human rights violations to occur, that type of thing. We're seeing a hypocrisy evolve here that really is demonstrating and underscoring China's ability to get their way, despite what our morals and rules may be here in America.
Now, I know the average Tennessean is a constitutional conservative. It's a very red state now. Are they national security conservatives in the way that the Committee for the Present Danger emerged before Reagan? Do we have that sort of movement going on in the Republican Party?
I'll tell you what was palpable to me. When I went home as Afghanistan fell, veterans from every corner of the state, and we have a large number of veterans. You know, the 101st Airborne is situated there in Tennessee. Many have retired there. We have the National Gold Medal Museum situated in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I was there with gold medal winners and recipients. It was palpable, the embarrassment that Tennesseans felt over the collapse of Afghanistan, the fact that we'd been in there for 20 years, that they had sons, daughters, husbands. They'd been served there themselves. They fought. They lost blood and treasure there. For what? For Biden to give it all up for a press release? I mean, there was a palpable anger there, and there's an embarrassment that is of epic proportion. We've never seen something like this, a failure of this nature. And even though Tennessee is an interior state, we have a pride in America. We understand that a strong America is a successful America, and I felt it very, very strongly that Tennesseans are very much in support of a strong national defense.
So in the 1960 presidential campaign, the Nixon-Kennedy debates, a lot of it was about Taiwan and the missile gap. I'm sure you remember the history. You're too young to have heard it, but the history was Kennedy alleged a missile gap. The Democrats ran as the party of strength against a weakness that had occurred under Eisenhower and Nixon. Is there a missile gap right now? And does any Democrat that you know care about it enough to do something right now?
Well, we've got to do something about it right now. And I think it's incumbent on us. Tom Cotton is a strong voice on this, as you mentioned. And it's incumbent on us to make that point clearer and clearer every day. Again, I was speaking with Senator Inhofe, who is our ranking member on the Armed Services Committee. He gets this very clearly, and we're going to continue to push hard, very hard on this. And I think that we'll see Democrats come around to the realization that we really do have a gap. We've got to step up and fix it. We've got to make investments in R&D. We've got to make investments in the latest technology. We've got to streamline the whole procurement process, which is sclerotic and a real challenge for us to make the type of technology investment, successful investment that we need to make in the pace that we need to make it.
Well, I agree with all that. It just seems to me that if the Democrats are serious, they will not spend another $2 trillion like they did earlier this year and not spend some of it, a significant amount of it, on enduring national defense investments. And yet I don't believe there's a dollar. Is there even a dollar in this bill that you know of for defense?
Again, the Republican side hasn't shown us, but I've gone over what the House side has put in, and the answer is no. In fact, what they're talking about on a after inflation basis is essentially a disinvestment in our defense. There's a small increase, but the inflation is at such a high rate right now that on a net basis after inflation, it translates into an actual decrease in defense spending.
Well, good luck to you in persuading you and Senator Inhofe persuading your colleagues. Senator Reid, I mean, he's the chairman, right? He could get something. Yes. He could get something if he wanted it.
That's right. That's right. And I think that conversation is underway and will continue to tighten, particularly in light of the news that you just mentioned with China's testing of the hypersonic technology.
I hope it resonates. Certainly it seems like big media has noticed it today. Senator Bill Hagerty from Tennessee, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you, Senator.
Likewise.
From Tennessee, Alliance Defending Freedom has been doing a lot of good because they've got great lawyers across the country, including the volunteer state. Will you volunteer to help the Alliance Defending Freedom? Their banner is over at HughHewitt.com. It has to load. Please make a contribution. I need a few $1,000 contributors, people who can afford to do it. Keep the first freedom intact so that the country can talk about issues like this and not become Finlandized. We need the Alliance Defending Freedom to protect speech on campuses, churches, and communities. They do so at the banner at HughHewitt.com. Please go and be generous right now. Come right back. I'll update you on the markets next. It's morning in D.C. Stay tuned.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
But can you share with us an overview of how Mark Zuckerberg and his wife directed literally hundreds of millions, I think $419 million into communities, into areas that Biden really needed, and how that plays out?
Mark Zuckerberg and his wife Priscilla Chan donated out of their own personal resources, not through they have a private foundation that they normally would do something like this through, but they went through they use their own private resources, and they funneled those resources into a little sleepy Chicago-based nonprofit called Center for Technology and Civic Life. This had nothing to do with conventional campaign finance, like a donation to the DNC to blanket the airwaves with a pro-Democrat Party message. This was money that was funneled through this little 501c3, which is supposed to be nonpartisan organization, directly into the election process. It's as if the DNC was somehow able to insinuate itself into local election offices and kind of take over the running of the on-the-ground realities of the election from within these local election offices, that even though a lot of the people that work there have their own partisan leanings and whatnot, the vast majority of them are serious professionals who try and do the best job that they can. But the activists who came along with CTCL money were not so objectively inclined.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at Rumble. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
I have to get your reaction to Peppermint Patty, who was at the podium, who was explaining why, high gas prices, Boris, it's not a problem everywhere, really. Cut 5.
For a range of issues, and we should talk about those, that the American people are, of course, impacted by rising prices of gas in some parts of the country, not all.
Well, Boris, it's okay then, because it's only some parts of the country. Which parts of the country, Boris?
Oh, yeah. So there's that 50. Remember, Obama thought there was like 62 states. So it's probably those 12 states or whatever it was. Those are the parts of the country they're referring to.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
The most powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized.
We are now all rooting for his success.
That's not what happened. It was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
Joe Rogan is a good man. Joe Rogan's a fun person. I don't agree with him on everything. I have to say this every time because I get these emails from people. Charlie, how dare you? Like, what are you, Greta Thunberg? Look, Joe Rogan has a different worldview on certain things, but he loves freedom and he loves his country. He's willing to speak out about it. He has been phenomenal on the lockdowns, on the vaccine, on masks. I had a chance to meet Joe Rogan about a month ago in Los Angeles. And Joe Rogan, right when I met him, when we posted it on Instagram, and the picture we said has ivermectin boys, and it went totally viral because you're not allowed to say that. And so Joe Rogan, of course, took ivermectin after getting the Fauci virus and made a rapid turnaround.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
I need you to listen to me, every single morning. Good morning, America. Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway. Every time I think of the Blues Brothers, I laugh. This is really one of the great sequences of movies. Generally, somebody, you put this in the top 10 music bits in a movie?
This?
Yeah.
Top 10?
Yeah. Belushi dancing, Aykroyd playing the harmonica.
It's pretty good. I don't know if I'd make it top 10. It's probably top 20.
We got to make a list at some point with Sonny on the top 20 musical moments in movies. But I think Somebody to Love in Blues Brothers is definitely there. I think it is. I believe it. By the way, I'm told that Chris Ann may have been awakened by someone early, like 2 hours before the show.
Like my boss?
Well, somebody impersonating
Like
me.
my boss.
My account was hacked, is what I'm trying to tell you. Someone hacked into my phone
your
mistakenly
account was hacked.
and mistakenly called you 2 hours early.
You're going to go that route.
Yeah, it was hacked.
I see.
She's not happy with me, I understand.
Well,
Would you?
The reason she's not happy with you is because she's awake.
She's awake.
If she wasn't awake, she wouldn't be unhappy.
Would you just tell her, please, my account was hacked? Now, I do want to talk about that real estate bubble and investments. KeyCityCapital.com/Hugh is a sponsor of this show. Charlie comes on and talks about never giving the federal government $1. Don't let them keep $1 that they took wrongly because you didn't take deductions. Don't let them take $1. More importantly, diversify and get some good strategic advice. And I trust KeyCityCapital.com/Hugh. I gather a lot of you have called them or emailed them in the last 2 weeks since I introduced you to KeyCityCapital.com. I encourage you to talk to Charlie. Just do it. If you have to diversify a significant amount of money, just do it. Because they have, I just am very impressed with their approach. Otherwise, I would not let them sponsor the show. They're like AndrewandTodd.com, which is every day at this time the financial update brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. Andrew Del Rey, Todd Avakian with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. And Todd Avakian is just such a pro. Andrew is such a pro, too. I never hear anything from him. I have to call Andrew to find out what's going on. And it's wonderful because they're busy working on your loans. You folks want to refinance your house, you want to buy real estate when the market's down there. The 10-year Treasury jumped up to 1.635% yesterday. I believe that is the highest it has been this year. I think that is the highest. So that means your borrowing cost to refinance or purchase real estate just went up. Unless you're going to pay cash, and some of you do. Well, get out there and refi and get the money out and get it done. Just get it done. Call them up, 888-888-1172. Yesterday, our markets continue to absorb the Wesbury lesson, which is we're going to have inflation in this country, including stocks, for at least another 9 months in stocks, continued gains. Inflation is going to be here for years because of the amount of money Democrats announced yesterday, the big breaking news, they're scaling down. Their biggest package possible will be $2 trillion. They start off at $7 trillion. Then they went down to 5. Then they went down to 3.5. The squad's in disarray. Bernie's in retreat. Joe Manchin is standing there like a red ink Cincinnatus on the bridge. Horatio on the bridge. I'm getting my metaphors mixed up. Horatio on the bridge. But he's with red ink. He only wants to spend $1.5 trillion more we don't have. And so, given the $2 trillion we didn't have at the beginning of the year and the $1.5 trillion he wants to spend, this is going to be crazy. So the Dow went up 198 points yesterday, and the NASDAQ went up 107, and Americans are buying stuff with their new money. And China today went down 0.17%, the China index, where everybody else is green, and we're going up. Why is that? They're going to have a bust. And you heard it here first. I am not an investment advisor. I don't pretend to be one. On the Nixon Foundation Investment Committee, I just ask questions and listen to people know what they're doing. But I'll tell you, the Wall Street Journal is warning you should be taking account of this. Get into American real estate while you can. I'll be right back. America, don't go anywhere. You're listening to The Hugh Hewitt Show.
Curious about what you're missing in the universe? The After Show? 21 years of Hugh Hewitt shows on demand? Go to www.huniverse.com right now, where it's only 99 cents to join for the first month. www.huniverse.com.
Gallagher Show.
Go ahead and tell me that you voted for Joe Biden and you can't believe what's happened to America. Jimmy Carter is going to be a resounding success compared to this guy. Listen to Circleback Psaki attempting lamely to explain away Ron Klain supporting the charge that all of this crisis in America with the empty shelves and surging inflation and the supply chain crisis is a high-class problem, and it's actually a good sign. You know, people, it's a good thing.
Why would Ron Klain tweet that, and would you agree that that's a little bit tone deaf?
Do you think 2 tweets means more? I'm just curious. So just for context, what Ron Klain retweeted was a tweet from the former chairman of economic advisors, Jason Furman, where he said, for full context, which I think is important, most of the economic problems we're facing, inflation, supply chains, are high-class problems. What he went on to say is, we wouldn't have had them if unemployment rate was still 10%. We would instead have had a much worse problem. So I think the point here is, well, there are some critics who are saying what some of these critics are saying we don't know if they're saying that what they thought was great was when the unemployment rate was double what it is today, or when people were locked in their homes and therefore gas prices were lower. We're at this point because the unemployment rate has come down and been cut in half, because people are buying more goods, because people are traveling, and because demand is up, and because the economy is turning back on.
Give 'em the old razzle-dazzle, razzle-dazzle 'em. That's Jen Psaki.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at Rumble.
Streaming on Salem Now.
This is a story of how 1 million children were placed with local foster families through an unlikely alliance between the Chinese government and a British footballer. Parents from all walks of life share their stories of overcoming the one-child policy by taking in orphans. With unprecedented access across the country, this is a unique insight into the lives of the 90s orphans now driving the 21st century's fastest growing economy. This story needs to be told across the world. At a time where there's so much negativity and cynicism, here's proof that a single leap of faith can change the world.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
The most powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized to go after perceived domestic enemies. And that's very scary.
Our constitutional democracy enshrines the peaceful transfer of power.
We are now all rooting for his success. The peaceful transition of power is one of the hallmarks of our democracy.
We don't live in the United States of America as any of us would like to understand it.
We have a peaceful transition of power process. That's not what happened. They interviewed General Flynn, and they did it in what was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
This is what third world security states do. They spy on their political opponents like this.
This is part of a concerted Russian influence operation.
Russian interference.
They colluded. They were in on it.
He would constantly say, I have seen evidence of collusion.
Until this is released, I can't comment. I can't go into the particulars.
Russians, I'm not going to be specific. But he knew he could just say it on TV and then hide behind, well, it's all classified, I can't get into it.
Well, it's classified. You can't see it. Collusion. You just got to be willing to see it.
New York's Daily News ran this front page, Trump is Hitler.
How could 62 million Americans vote for Hitler? Are 62 million Americans Nazis?
We really almost thought it was a joke. Like, really, you're not going to accept that you lost this election?
Then they see the Russia collusion narrative sitting right there in front of them and say, why don't we just say that he cheated? It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence. It's given people who are bad faith actors a license to do whatever they want because they literally feel like they're fighting Russian spies and Nazis.
Russiagate has been the most egregious abuse of everything that was supposed to have been good about our government.
The thing that they were investigating the Trump campaign for is what they themselves were doing.
Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway Live. Our big Jim is Geraghty the Indispensable. He has been for pretty much the 2 decades I've been on the air. Good morning, Jim. How are you?
Good morning, Hugh.
I want to, since I saw you at John Androzik's concert, I've been thinking about asking you this question. I know you're a dad. I'm vaccinated. The fetching Miss Hewitt is vaccinated. We both had boosters. My 3 kids are vaccinated. My 3 grandchildren will be vaccinated. They're all in single digits as soon as they are eligible. I'm curious, and everyone will get boosters all the time. I just think that's the smart choice for healthy families with no underlying condition. Do the Geraghty's approach this the same way?
Yes. And I'm not going to confirm or deny anything. I'm just going to observe that I know of many parents in Authenticity Woods, which is the nickname for my Fairfax County neighborhood, who had 11-year-olds or 11 and a half, or who were knocking on the door of 12, and who did not want to wait until, I guess now the word is sometime next month is a possibility. For a lot of the past year, we were hearing midwinter, so maybe December, maybe January. So they just went in and said, yes, my kid is 12. They weren't really checking, birth certificates or anything like that, and they got their kids vaccinated at age 11. But I cannot confirm or deny any particular parents who said that.
All right, so let me tell you what I think is going on here, is that Ron Klain just tweeted out, it's coming, and that's great. That's good news, and responsible parents will run down and do it. And I want to make this argument and see if you agree with it, because you know this community better than I do. I'm 65 years old. You're in the middle of it. The downside of getting COVID isn't COVID for all but a handful of kids. It's a bad cold. It's a cough. For all but 500 children in the United States, that's the case. But the downside is missing school. And when you're quarantined or you get COVID, you've got to stay away for months, given how it runs through a family. It's absolutely, we can't afford any more of this, Jim Geraghty.
Yeah, there's been a lot of pushback. I'm hearing less of it now than when the school year first began. To give a molecule of credit to the school districts here in Northern Virginia, but also like in the whole broader D.C. area. First of all, they were very slow to reopen last year. I guess both my sons went back. One went back in early March last year. One went back to late March. First, it was 2 days a week, and then about a month, maybe 5-6 weeks later, they went to 4 days a week. And this year, thankfully, they started a little bit early in August. It was back 5 days a week, and generally it's been smooth. But, on Fridays, we get our update. There have been 2 cases found in your school or 3 cases or something like that. It's been pretty manageable. But what some folks, particularly I guess I was hearing over in Maryland, is if anybody came to class with any degree of sniffles, a lot of schools were just like, you know what, everybody go home. Everybody in the class, go home. We're doing remote learning. We're doing distance learning. Even before the COVID test came back positive. And so you basically had reopened schools in theory, but functionally they were continuing to be closed. And obviously this is driving parents crazy. And if you're wondering, hey, why are workers not returning to the workforce, or why are women still slow returning to the workforce and things like that, I can't help but get the feeling that not knowing if your kid's school is going to be open.
Oh, this is a good point. Boy, this is a good point.
I mean, you may, the other thing was also the question of, okay, let's say you haven't tested positive, but somebody in your kid's class was. Everybody's wearing masks, but everybody knows kids start fiddling with their masks or something like that. They're not 100% perfect. What's a reasonable amount of time to have kids stay home? And at first, I think a lot of the school districts were thinking like 2 weeks, and I think a lot of folks have said, come on, that's It's really.
By the way, Jim, that is in fact still operative policy at other places in Virginia, and it's causing chaos. But I had not considered how people who had disengaged from the economy in order to take care of their kids might be unwilling to re-engage until they know their kids can actually go to school. I really hadn't thought about that. That's a very, very smart point as to why we have so many unfilled jobs.
It is one of the things that was really fast. I'm sure every parent who's called into your program over the last 2 years has observed. In mid-March, suddenly you can't get a babysitter. You have to quarantine. Even if your work was open, even if you were an essential worker, boy, you hope you have a spouse who can stay home and take care and watch your kids. And this whole, the idea of our entire economy was just based on this idea that right around the time when I finish this phone call with you, Hugh, I'm going to walk down with my younger son to the school bus. He's going to get on the school bus. My older son's going to be there till, mid-afternoon. My younger son will get home a little bit later. And during that time, I can be working at home. I can go into work. But just parents have 8 hours or so, or 7 hours, whatever amount of time in the middle of the day where they can go and do work. And if your kid is homesick, well, you can't do that. You don't have that option. And for the past 2 years, the question, and of course, every day, listeners to your program know, the slightest, our school board is literally made of snowflakes because they are afraid of any snowflake, and they will cancel school if the dew point gets too low. I'm exaggerating slightly, but Northern Virginia, we freak out about any possibility of snow. Now, National Review has always been very laid back and very easygoing about the needs of parenting and stuff like that. But a lot of parents, there's a flurries, and all of a sudden school's canceled, and all of a sudden you got to say to work, hey, I can't come in today because I can't get a sitter and I can't get anybody to watch my child. There's been this giant fundamental disconnect between the decision-making of schools and when they feel like being open and when they feel like something has happened in which they can't be open.
This is so
and the
on
expectations
point.
of work.
When I was a lad, the two magic words were lake effect. When lake effect snow was coming, day off, lake effect, and Northeastern Ohio shuts down. In Washington, D.C., there are like 30 different words for lake effect. But I'm not living this. I'm not living, COVID quarantine is now the new lake effect. I'm not living.
If it's a blizzard, everyone's like, okay, well, the whole area shuts down. But when it's a very mild snowfall, schools close, but other businesses are like, no, we're staying open. Nobody's, you feel ridiculous as a parent. And maybe in light of the Pete Buttigieg news, this is one of my podcast co-hosts, Mickey White, made this fantastic point, where she made this observation that every working mother, or almost every working mother, is paranoid about the perception of her coworkers that she's not working hard enough. That she, oh my goodness, I don't want anybody thinking I'm not pulling my own weight. I'm going to take maternity leave, but I'm going to stay in touch with the office. I'm going to call in and check in. And, they just wouldn't do what Pete Buttigieg did of just, walking away as this crisis is getting worse. Look, I'm glad Pete Buttigieg is a father. I hope he enjoys his special time and all that stuff. But there was this observation that, most working women just have this, down to their bone marrow sense of, oh, God, I don't want anyone thinking I'm lazy, or I don't want anyone thinking that I'm not working hard enough.
I'll tell you what.
Clearly wasn't a factor in this one.
Pete Buttigieg had better stay away from military spouses with deployed spouses. He really should not. They never stop. It's the most amazing thing I've ever seen. Okay, let me ask you about the second big issue. I hope you write about kids and COVID vaccines and what people should do, because I don't have any actual authority in that area. I'm not going to make a decision on behalf of a child. I know what my grandkids are going to do, but that's because their mom decided to do that. Let me ask you about something that I'm very happy about. This morning, Tom Friedman wrote a hardline column on China, basically Second Cold War stuff. Financial Times.
Tom Friedman wanted to be China for a day.
Well,
they were awesome. We sucked. That was his message for years.
Well, it's over. The second Cold War is upon us. And I believe, after reading David Drucker's book, and I read you, and I just follow the Republican Party, we're not going to nominate anyone in the Republican Party for any office unless they are a combative constitutional conservative who believes that we're in the second Cold War. Do you agree with me?
Yeah. And what's more is, Joe Biden back in 2019, May, was saying, they're not bad folks. These guys aren't competition for us. Now, thankfully, he seems to have changed his opinion on that. But I think, Joe Biden's default setting was probably established in the 70s or 80s, or maybe the 90s at the latest. And he just can't get his head around the fact that China is convinced they were the preeminent leaders of the world until about the late 1800s, and then things went wrong with the Boxer Rebellion. And they are returning to their natural role as the leaders of the world. They are meant to do this. This is destiny. This is what they are, they have a duty to lead the rest of the world away from our decadent and foolish and nonsensical ideas of democracy and free market.
I think you're right, Jim. I think this is Middle Kingdom hubris, but that it becomes their effort to Finlandize everything. And this is a new term for a lot of my listeners who are under the age of 50. They won't know what Finlandization means, but it's when you dominate a region. And I think the CCP, I think Xi wants to Finlandize the world. They've got Hollywood and the NBA, and they're moving out.
Well, I mean, Hugh, if there's anything we know about them, is they are extraordinarily competent and extraordinarily driven, except when it comes to labs. The labs aren't very secure. They spill stuff all the time, don't have great safety. But what's the worst that could happen? It's not like they're going to kill a couple million people around the world just by being reckless.
Well, that
already happened.
All right, so here's my question. We agree. The Financial Times, the Washington Post, Tom Friedman agree. How can we spend another $2 trillion, which will take us up to about $8 trillion of spending in 2 years, and not spend any money on defense and strategic after the hypersonic launch, after our Sputnik moment that nobody noticed?
So today's Morning Jolt, which I'm almost ready to send off to the editors, is all about this whole Build Back Better thing, and the idea that this is just completely disconnected from what the actual problems facing the country are. And apparently Biden's going to be in Scranton today. And I'm sure his message is going to be, this is going to create jobs. This is a great jobs bill. We have 10.4 million unfilled jobs in the country right now. We have a worker shortage. And he's talking about great news. I'm going to dump a whole lot more money in the economy. So that's going to help with inflation. Don't worry. Lots of federal spending always works out well. And I'm going to create a whole bunch more jobs we need to fill when we have 10.4 million and a worsening worker shortage. Oh, and a supply chain problem. Oh, and a border problem. Oh, and Afghanistan.
Oh, and let me tell you, a missile gap. We haven't had missile gap since 1960, and that time the Democrats were using it in acts against Eisenhower and Nixon. Well, the missile gap is real. It's the hypersonic missile gap, and we're behind, Jim Geraghty. And I can't believe there isn't at least one Democrat who's going to walk into Chuck Schumer's office and say, we're sending $50 billion into my state to build these missiles or more submarines or whatever strategery we need. Is there even one who wants the money for their state? They get it.
You say, Hugh, how many Democrats were going into Chuck Schumer's office and screaming about Afghanistan until Kabul fell?
Well, I think Angus King might be in there saying, Angus is pretty smart. He may slide in there in the last minute and say, Bath Iron Works up in, in Maine.
He'll want it all in submarines. He'll want it all in all in stuff.
Fine by me. We need more of the above. We need it all. That's what we say about energy production, all of the above. Geraghty, how do people sign up for the Morning Jolt?
At nationalreview.com, just click on the left side under newsletters, and it also gets posted online every day. But a lot of people prefer getting it in their email accounts because that way your boss can't see you're reading National Review.
And getting smarter every day. Make sure that your children are reading Jim Geraghty as well. Geraghty the Indispensable, thank you, my friend.
Always enjoyed you.
Okay, time for ReliefFactor.com. My plug of my great sponsor. My great sponsor has me down here in fairly decent mood and body after a long travel day yesterday, after a long night with Brett Baer and 450 people at the Nixon Library, but I'm fine. I'm great. I hate normally those 7-hour plane flights. It wasn't 7 hours. It was more like 6. But beating against the wind for whatever reason, flying around, bumping around. I hate those. But sometimes you get them, and I'm not in the least aching over it. I do have to go back to sleep because I set the alarm for a West Coast alarm and got up 2 hours earlier than I needed to, and also got up Generalissimo and Mrs. Generalissimo. Well, actually, that was a hacker into my Twitter account, into my cell phone. Sent that direct message. But you can get your ReliefFactor.com starter pack and try it for yourself. A couple of you came up to me in Atlanta, AM 920, The Answer in Atlanta. You came up and said, I expect to see you in Columbus on Sunday night when the Center for Christian Virtue and 98.9 AM The Answer, 98.9 The Answer in Columbus. We sponsor the Ohio Republican debate. Bring your ReliefFactor.com packets to prove it to me, all right? Don't tell me you use it. Bring me a packet. I'm Hugh Hewitt. I'll be right back.
Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
Sanjay Gupta is used to the CNN way of doing things, which is, kind of kid gloves. And Joe Rogan said, no. You're in the lion's den now. You see, this is a place where people have testosterone, wisdom, and patriotism. You work for CNN where none of those things exist.
You're probably the only one at CNN that's glad.
No. We're not.
The rest of them are all lying about me taking horse medication. And we should talk about that.
That bothered you.
It should bother you, too. They're lying at your network about people taking human drugs versus drugs for veterinary.
Calling it a horse dewormer is not a flattering thing. I get that.
It's a lie. It's a lie on a news network, and it's a lie that's a willing... That's a lie that they're conscious of. This is not a mistake.
Yeah.
They're unfavorably framing it as veterinary medicine.
I love it. Rarely do you see justice happen in real time. Rarely. You know, I'm a big fan of the book of Job. And one of the things I like about the book of Job is that it's real. It's authentic. It's kind of why do bad things happen to good people? That's what the book of Job is about. In the second book of Plato's Republic, it talks about justice, and actually the narrative frames that good things happen to people that do good and bad things happen to things that do bad, and rarely do you actually ever get to see justice play out in real time. That's justice. Sanjay Gupta having to sit down for 2 hours of Joe Rogan being like, it should bother you. It's a conscious lie where you're saying that I should take a horse dewormer. And Sanjay Gupta said, man, that really bothered you. Yeah, it was the #1 news story on the planet that Joe Rogan is going around to Preakness or the Kentucky Derby with his hands open asking for medication.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
The most powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized.
We are now all rooting for his success.
That's not what happened. It was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
This is what third world security states do. They spy on their political opponents like this.
This is part of a concerted Russian influence operation.
Russians, I'm not going to be specific as he knew he could just say it on TV and then hide behind, well, it's all classified, I can't get into it.
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence. It's given people who are bad faith actors a license to do whatever they want.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to Salem on Salem Now.
The Democratic Party
is even worse than being poor. We would have sandwiches with no meat. My American dream entailed working hard and making $20,000 a year. But I surpassed that goal and became a corporate CEO.
We'll all be able to say, free at last, free at last.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to Salem Now. Streaming on Salem Now.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Can I give you an example of a great lead? A great lead. The course of the Dodgers season. 5 outs from a 3-0 ditch. Just one team has overcome in Major League Baseball history. Changed in their 6-5 win Tuesday when Cody Bellinger decided to chase a fastball several inches above the strike zone. By the time the baseball landed in the right field pavilion for a game-tying 3-run home run in the 8th inning, the fans, those who had stuck around to see Game 3 of the National League Championship Series, though, were roaring to a decibel level few have ever experienced inside Dodger Stadium. You know, West Coast fans are the worst fans in America. And I say that with appreciation for just how bad they are. They leave early. I mean, this goes back to, I went to Dodgers World Series game with David Eisenhower back in the day, 1979, I guess, 70, I can't remember. And it was the World Series, and they left. It's just California people. But way to go, Dodgers, keeping it alive. You know who else is surging? Not just the Dodgers, Glenn Youngkin. I told you that Terry McAuliffe was bleeding out 2 days ago when he put up his ad. Glenn Youngkin's taking me out of context. It's not true. I didn't say what I said. Well, he did say what he said, and Glenn Youngkin hit that hard in a new ad yesterday, cut number 11.
Glenn Youngkin's taking my words out of context.
Something you mentioned in Tuesday's debate is you said you don't believe parents should be telling schools what to teach. What did you mean by that?
Well, first of all, parents should be telling schools that they want their teachers to be vaccinated.
Do you think parents should have a say in the curriculum?
You don't want parents coming in every different school jurisdiction.
You alluded to parents staying out of this. We just want to make sure that we're understanding you correctly. What is your stance on that as far as what school agendas have to say for the kids?
First of all, this is determined by the State Board of Education and local school boards. And that's where it should be.
Do you still stand by your position that parents should not tell the schools what they should teach?
You do not want 25 parents picking books.
McAuliffe's reply?
We have a Board of Ed and we have local school boards who make the decisions about teaching. I'm not going to let parents come into schools. I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach. I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
That is a pretty brilliant ad.
That is how you do rapid response.
That's how you do rapid response. I am not surprised. Here's the deal. That State Board of Education needs corralling. We need Glenn Youngkin. These schools have to reopen. They have to get serious about STEM. They have to educate the underprivileged. They have to go out and make sure schools thrive in underserved areas and in poor areas. They have to give everybody a lift up. They have to get rid of CRT. They have to do everything Class A if the Commonwealth is going to be up to being the new Silicon Valley, which it is. Amazon's here, Google, they're all here. Virginia is the place. Richmond is going to become Northern Virginia, and then Virginia Beach is going to become the defense industry, and it's all in Virginia if the schools get it right. And so I'm going to play that again. So early voting is underway in Virginia. Call your friends who live in Virginia, and if you're in Virginia and haven't voted yet, go find your voters registered. Go get Glenn Youngkin vote in. It looks like it's happening. People feel very good, but you never... you know what Terry thinks about me. Terry McAuliffe loves me. All right, so you can trust me, Democrats. This is what Terry McAuliffe says about Hugh Hewitt.
I'm Terry McAuliffe, and you should listen to the Hugh Hewitt Show every single day, the greatest radio show in the United States of America.
Terry McAuliffe is absolutely right. And here is the greatest ad in the United States of America being played on the greatest radio show in America, Glenn Youngkin's new ad about Terry McAuliffe.
Glenn Youngkin's taking my words out of context.
Something you mentioned in Tuesday's debate is you said you don't believe parents should be telling schools what to teach. What did you mean by that?
Well, first of all, parents should be telling schools that they want their teachers to be vaccinated.
Do you think parents should have a say in the curriculum?
You don't want parents coming in every different school jurisdiction.
You alluded to parents staying out of this. We just want to make sure that we're understanding you correctly. What is your stance on that as far as what school agendas have to say for the kids?
First of all, this is determined by the State Board of Education and local school boards. And that's where it should be.
Do you still stand by your position that parents should not tell the schools what they should teach?
You do not want 25 parents picking books.
McAuliffe's reply?
We have a Board of Ed and we have local school boards who make the decisions about teaching. I'm not going to let parents come into schools. I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach. I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
I think Glenn Youngkin is going to win on the strength of that ad alone. Terry McAuliffe has been everywhere. It's just, retread Terry. Time for some vigor. Time for some vigor in the Virginia race. We need some vigor. John Kennedy vigor on education. It's a template for Republicans running everywhere. You have to be a combative constitutional conservative who is serious about national security to be a Republican in 2021. The Democrats are not serious about national security. They're very combative. They're spendthrifts who are driving inflation up, which is eating away at your ability to live. So get out there, Virginia, and start the red wave, because it's going to wash over this country. We're going to be serious again. We're going to get back on track, and it's going to start with Glenn Youngkin. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Dwayne. I have to thank Generalissimo, and I really want to apply to have Mrs. Generalissimo understand that we are going to find the person who hacked my account and called them 2 hours early today. We're going to find that person. And we're going to get that person. And I'll be back here.
That's like OJ finding the real killer.
Well, it's like the Russia. We're after it. We're working on it. Stay tuned, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.